Chapter 188. Step by step, step by step, step by step, Nangongja walked onto the huge platform. Other than the 5 altar lords, everyone else seemed to be suppressed by Nangongja's power to the point that they could not breathe. The Blood Garment Pavilion was located deep in the mountains, so it was naturally unavoidable for them to hear the chirping of birds and cicadas. However, at this moment the birds stopped singing, and the insects also stopped making noise. Everyone could clearly hear the sound of their own breathing, their own heartbeat, and the sound of their blood rushing through their veins. Everyone's gaze was focused on this person. It was as if everything was revolving around this person. I am Nangongja. Nangongja's voice rang out as if he was whispering in everyone's ears. He did not use much strength, but everyone could clearly hear Nangongja's voice. Some of you in the Blood Garment Pavilion may have heard of me, and many of you may not have heard of me. So, I will introduce myself to everyone here. I am Nangongja. Different people have different names for me. My opponents call me Yama, and my friends call me Hero. However, I know that these are not me. I am only myself, the me who holds a sword and fights to the death with others. However, when I made up my mind to come here and break through the path of dragonization with the sword, I knew that I had obtained another identity. I will be the head of the Blood Garment Pavilion. This identity not only makes me your immediate superior, but it also puts a heavy burden on my shoulders. I have also asked myself, can I really bear such a heavy burden? Managing and leading an organization is not a one-on-one fight. There are many problems that I have never faced before. I have to be responsible for the lives of everyone who is willing to join the Blood Garment Pavilion. In my previous life this was unimaginable. I am naturally lazy, but for various reasons I had to come here. In accordance with the wishes of senior banishment, you will be responsible for every life with this heavenly tribulation sword. As Nangongja spoke, the audience below the stage gradually became enthralled. Unlike countless people who had lofty aspirations, Nangongja was currently chatting with an ordinary person. She expressed her worries and confusion. Although it wasn't as imposing, it was very sincere. Almost everyone who could become a leader was a smart person. When interacting with others, it was inevitable that one would carefully ponder over the meaning of the other party's words. At this moment, Nangongja said everything so straightforwardly. Indeed, it was easy for others to hear his thoughts. However, I gradually understood why I repeatedly went against my own will and came here to challenge this dragonization path. Because I need you just like how you need me. I have experienced the Shinobi World War, and I have seen countless people displaced in the war. They are very similar to the ancestors of the Blood-Robed Pavilion who were oppressed and exploited. Everyone present, I believe that you all think that you have enough strength to protect yourself in the Shinobi world. But is this really the case? I believe that you have already felt the pressure I have imposed on you. This is not to show off. It is to tell you that there is always someone stronger. When you think that your strength is enough, you should know that there are many forces that are beyond your control in this world. Although the Blood-Robed Pavilion is a hidden force, it has never been a hidden force. Countless disciples of the Blood-Robed Pavilion are distributed in many places in the Shinobi world. I believe that you all actually understand that the Shinobi world has become a pool of undercurrents. Unlike the Shinobi World War that started just between ninjas, this disaster has almost enveloped everyone who lives on this land. Including you and me. I am the successor of senior banishment, and my relationship with the Blood-Robed Pavilion is extremely deep. I don't wish to use my own strength to threaten all of you and make all of you submit to my rule. In the Shinobi world, there are not many cultivators who practice internal strength. Every person who cultivates internal energy is like a brother or sister to me. This position is not the basis for me to rule you all. It is the guarantee that I can protect everything I want to protect with everyone. Nangongja's words were very straightforward. Everyone below the stage was also listening carefully. Most of the people in the Blood-Robed Pavilion were the orphans of the first batch of internal strength cultivators who were rescued by the banishment. The story of their ancestors was so clear in their minds. Anyone with a normal brain would not like the war that swallowed people's lives. However, Nangongja's words meant that the war was about to come to everyone. At this point, Nangongja suddenly withdrew all of the pressure that he had released. Many disciples with lower cultivation levels directly sat on the ground as their knees went soft. I'm not good at talking. Originally, the 5 altar masters prepared a very thick speech for me. There are many valuable words in it, many words that can prove my authority. However, I don't want to treat you like this. That's all I have to say. If you think that I can protect your lives by being the head of the Blood-Robed Pavilion, then I will be. If you think that the Blood-Robe Pavilion does not need someone like me, please be honest. Please tell me frankly, I won't stay any longer." After that, Nangongja turned around and left. Only the 5 altar masters who still looked stupid on the stage, and many middle-level and high-level cadres of the Blood-Robe Pavilion were left behind. There were gradually some voices of discussion in the audience. After all, Nangongja's actions were indeed a little too different from ordinary people. "I'll go and see our head. I'll have to trouble you to comfort the people in the audience," Clearwater said to the 4 altar masters. Most of the people in the audience were disciples from the Greenwood altar. The rest were disciples from the Red Flame altar, the Sharp Metal altar, and the Thick Earth altar. The people from the Clearwater altar were engaged in some undercover and intelligence missions, so they could not leave at all. Therefore not many people came. It was indeed the best choice to let the other 4 altar masters comfort the disciples while he went to look for the honest and somewhat willful head. Old Man Ching Mu and the other 3 nodded as well. This new head seat originally looked quite steady. Why did he turn a proper succession ceremony into such a mess? It was really puzzling. Chapter 189. Knock knock. There was a light knock on the door of the Blood Clothing Pavilion's head office where Nangongja was. Bai Shui stood in front of the door, waiting for Nangongja's response. "Please come in," Nangongja's lazy voice came from the office. Bai Shui's lips curled into a smile as she opened the door and looked at Nangongja. The blood robe that represented the Blood Robe Pavilion had been casually placed by Nangongja's side, as if he didn't care. "You've really created quite a bit of trouble for us, our new Lord Head." Bai Shui's words were somewhat reproachful, as if she was criticizing Nangongja's actions. However, there was still an indescribable smile in her eyes, as if she was very appreciative of Nangongja's actions. "Is it very troublesome? If you can't even solve such a small matter, then how did you all become altar masters who are second only to one person and above thousands?" Nangongja looked at Bai Shui and said with a hint of ridicule, "Of course we can solve such a small problem, but it's really annoying to have such trouble appear out of nowhere." Bai Shui took a few steps forward so that she could lean on Nangongja's desk. Her beautiful figure was displayed in front of Nangongja. Unlike Mashiro and Nangongro, who were still young and tender, Bai Shui was simply like the most delicate flower, displaying her beauty. Bai Shui's face was almost pressed against Nangongja's face, her hot breath from her nose and mouth hitting Nangongja's face. The head speech just now was indeed a good speech in a certain sense. It's simply like a challenge letter with the fiercest words. It's just short of pointing at our noses and cursing the disciples of the Blood Garment Pavilion as trash. Unable to ensure your own safety, we are waiting for a lazy person like you to come and save us from the fire and water. You are really arrogant, our Lord Head." Nangongja moved his head back, as if he didn't want to maintain such a position that could easily be misunderstood by others. He said indifferently, "I don't think it's nonsense. I don't think I'm spouting nonsense. The relationship between me and the Blood Garment Pavilion is one of mutual benefit. Indeed, these are all facts. But if you make it so clear, how awkward will it be?" Bai Shui reached out her hand and flicked Nangongja's head, as if she was teaching her disobedient little brother. "You?" Nangongja didn't know how long it had been since he was treated like this, but after being flicked on the head by Bai Shui, Nangongja didn't feel any resistance. Instead, he felt that Bai Shui's actions were natural. It was really strange. Okay, I won't waste time here with the head. Anyway, with the head's temper, I think he won't listen to my nagging. I'd better go back and appease those disciples who were ridiculed by the head seat together with those fools," Bai Shui said, no longer leaning on Nangongja's desk. She waved her hand without looking back and walked out of Nangongja's office. "Bai Shui? Who are you?" Nangongja seemed to be asking Bai Shui, but also seemed to be asking himself. Bai Shui gave Nangongja a very strange feeling. "How is our Lord Head?" Aoki asked when he saw Bai Shui coming over. "Alas." Bai Shui sighed as if she was very disappointed. He didn't regret it at all. "This is really... Was our decision to let him go on the dragonization path wrong?" Aoki seemed to regret letting Nangongja challenge the dragonization path and giving Nangongja the opportunity to become the head of the Blood Cloth Pavilion. In fact, there is nothing wrong with what he said. We do need his help to really set foot in the ninja world. His reputation, his strength is what we need. Although his actions today were reckless, it isn't bad news for us. The Blood Cloth Pavilion has been under the management of the 5 altar lords. Even in the early days of its establishment, the banishment elders didn't want to reach their hands into the power of the Blood Cloth Pavilion. Since Nangongja has disappointed us so much, then we will treat him as a clay statue. We will just treat him well. Bai Shui didn't seem to mind that Nangongzhi didn't know how to manage the bloodcloth pavilion. On the contrary, she was somewhat glad that Nangongzhi didn't know how to manage the bloodcloth pavilion. Bai Shui is right. That boy named Nangongzhi doesn't seem so reliable. Since he is willing to lose such an opportunity to win over so many disciples of the Blood Garment Pavilion, then we don't mind making him a mere figurehead. Let him stay here obediently. Akame was the first to jump out and agree with Bai Shui's point of view. She looked at Bai Shui with a pair of eyes full of a kind of flattery. That's the only way. Since he is so useless, he can't blame us for treating him like this. Aoki shook his head as if he was very disappointed. He no longer discussed with the other altar lords and turned to appease the disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion. Seeing Aoki leave, whether it was Rue Jin or Ho Tu, in fact, tacitly agreed to Nangongzhi's attitude, so the remaining 4 altar lords also left. At this moment, no one knew what the 5 altar lords were thinking in their hearts. However, the decision to make Nangongzhi a figurehead was definitely going to be fulfilled. Nangongzhi's office was at the top of the symbolic tall building of the Bloodcloth Pavilion. Through the window, not only could one see the grief and indignation of the ordinary disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion, but one could also see the scene when the 5 altar lords had gathered together to discuss their attitude towards Nangongzhi. This opening is really just right. The Bloodcloth Pavilion is indeed very important to me, but I have an almost perfect escape route in the Lion Clan's alternate space. As long as I am willing, no matter what, I can guarantee the safety of Mishiro and the others. To me, the Bloodcloth Pavilion is just a chess piece. I hope the plan that Ruru and I have discussed for so long can be implemented smoothly. When the time comes, whether it is the Bloodcloth Pavilion or my enemy, they will all obediently fall into my hands. The so-called declaration of war and the attitude of the 5 altar lords towards Nangongzhi in the future were actually all under Nangongzhi's control. If you want to take, you must first give. Instead of pointlessly clashing head-on with the 5 altar masters who held great power in their hands, he might as well play dumb and wait for the right time to take everything into his hands. Chapter 190. Pa. A crisp sound came from the window of Nangongzhi's room. At the same time there was the sound of glass shattering. Nangongzhi. What right do you have to succeed the position of the head of the Blood Garment Pavilion? You were just lucky enough to pass the path of dragon transformation. To have the opportunity to become the head of the Blood Garment Pavilion is already a blessing that you have cultivated for many lifetimes. You actually dared to belittle the Blood Garment Pavilion in public, as if you are very unwilling to become our head. Why don't you come out and face your death? A voice came from the broken window. The voice was filled with grief and anger, as if the thing that he cherished the most had been belittled and insulted. This was the norm for the disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion. Almost all of the disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion were the earliest disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion. Their lives began in the Bloodcloth Pavilion. They grew up in the Bloodcloth Pavilion, became strong in the Bloodcloth Pavilion, and cultivated their own temperament and pride in the Bloodcloth Pavilion. Nangongzhi's ridiculing speech was like a LV max. He slammed the disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion to the ground and even stepped on them a few times. Nangongzhi even felt that this group of people had come a little late. It seemed that the appeasement of the 5 altar masters had a little effect. Looking at the angry disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion standing at the entrance of the courtyard where he lived, and a few of them seemed to have responded to his call to follow behind the disciple, Nangongzhi could not help but feel a little funny. Although these people were about the same age as him and might even be a little older, they did not seem to have much experience in dealing with people. She didn't know who instigated it, but she stupidly became a target that pushed her and ruined her reputation. Nangongzhi raised his Heaven's Disaster Sword and put the Bloodcloth Pavilion on his shoulders. Then he jumped out of the broken window. Originally, when the disciples of the Bloodcloak Pavilion smashed the windows of Nangongzhi's residence, they were secretly delighted that their prank had succeeded. They were also relieved that Nangongzhi had not come out to look for them. After all, the pressure that Nangongzhi released during the enthronement ceremony was something that everyone could feel. How could such a person be defeated by his disciples? Therefore, when Nangongzhi jumped out of the broken window and stood in front of them, Nangongzhi was stunned. The few of them couldn't help but follow the instinctive actions of their bodies and take a step back. Nangongzhi noticed their actions. Nangongzhi couldn't help but sneer at them. He placed the Heavenly Calamity Sword on the ground and placed his arms on the hilt. His eyes looked down at the disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion with a hint of mockery and coldness in his eyes. Weren't you very fierce just now? She smashed my window and she's still making a ruckus downstairs. Why did you take a few steps back when you saw me? When the disciples of the blood-cloth pavilion heard Nangongji's mocking voice, they couldn't help but blush. Under the gaze of the others, the disciple who took the lead could only try to overcome his fear. He took a few steps forward and stood in front of Nangongji. Did I say anything wrong? Although our blood-cloth pavilion's reputation is not well known, since you're here, you should know how powerful the blood-cloth pavilion is. This is the place where I was born and raised. Every word you said was an insult to the blood-cloth pavilion. Although I know I can't beat you even if I have to risk my life, I will make you apologize for insulting the blood-cloth pavilion. The words stuttered out of the blood-cloth pavilion disciple's mouth. If it was just based on what he said, perhaps many people would give him a thumbs up and praise him by saying, "What a little hero who doesn't fear power." However, when they looked at the little hero's trembling legs and fluttering eyes, were these words really what the blood-cloth pavilion disciple wanted to say? If so, it would really be a disgrace to the little hero's name. Boy. Wanting to show off is a bad habit of every young person. This is nothing. Who hasn't been young and frivolous? However, to be used by others like a fool, are you really prepared to anger the strong? Nangongji's face no longer had the mocking expression from before. Instead, there was a trace of seriousness. Such a serious attitude made the disciples of the blood-cloth pavilion who came to provoke Nangongji even more flustered. Did they really do something wrong? Did they really overestimate their abilities? Was he really prepared to face the wrath of the emperor? These questions lingered in the minds of the blood-cloth pavilion disciples. Suddenly, Nangongji released his murderous aura. The majestic aura reminded the teenagers of Nangongji's insufferably arrogant attitude when he walked out of the attic. It was like a god patrolling. Don't come over. The leading teenager actually sat down on the ground because of the pressure of the aura. Almost in an instant, his face was full of tears and snot. He kicked his legs that had become somewhat weak, only hoping that he could get farther away from Nangongji. Looking back at the blood-cloth pavilion disciples who came with him, the teenager was even more afraid when he saw that they had already disappeared. Before coming, the teenager actually knew a lot about Nangongji. This person was a famous butcher in the ninja world. During the Ninja World War, because he killed a lot of people, he was called Yama. Could a small shrimp like him really save his life in the hands of Nangongji? He didn't know where he got the strength from, but he actually stood up and stumbled to run away. Nangongji didn't stop him. In fact, Nangongji deliberately let the teenager stand up by himself. His eyes glanced at a secret place near Nangongji's residence, and Nangongji's voice came. "If you have any difficulties in the future, just come to me directly." Such a small shrimp, although I don't care about his life or death, is really troublesome. Nangongji knew that although he didn't deliberately raise his voice, the people hiding in the dark must be able to hear him clearly. Although he said that it was troublesome, did Nangongji really feel that these things were troublesome, so he let the reckless teenager go? No one knew and no one cared. Chapter 191. Nangongji was sitting in his office, slowly reading a book that recorded some of the history of the blood-cloth pavilion. However, his slightly squinted eyes and long breathing made people feel that he was actually taking a nap. This kind of leisurely time was not as long as Nangongji imagined, because the door of Nangongji's office was violently opened. Nangongji opened his eyes in annoyance and looked at the door lock that was still half hanging on the door. He could not help but light a candle for this devastated door lock in his heart. In front of Nangongji stood a very rough-looking man. It was Qi Yin, the altar master of the Scarlet Flame Altar of the Five Elements Altar of the Blood-Cloth Pavilion. This group of little bastards actually dared to find trouble with you in the middle of the night. See if I don't teach them a lesson. We have to spank their asses so that they know what they should do and what they shouldn't do. Before Nangongji could speak, Qi Yin had already spoken first. It seemed that it was because of the group of blood-cloth pavilion disciples who smashed the windows of Nangongji's residence last night. Qi Yin, why are you so angry? Calm down, calm down. It's just a group of children fooling around. I didn't even take it to heart, so why are you acting like this? It's just a pity that the door lock of my house has been broken into such a state. Nangongji's words were neither salty nor light, which made Qi Yin a little embarrassed. He scratched his head, looking like a simple and honest person. I was so anxious that I actually broke the door of the head's room. I'll go find someone to fix it. You don't have to worry about it. After saying that, Qi Yin had already walked out of Nangongji's room. Only the somewhat broken door was left, as if it was still complaining about Qi Yan's atrocities. Qi Yin. Huh? Nangongja laughed for no reason, not knowing if he was laughing at Qi Yan or someone else. After the young Bloody Garment Pavilion disciple smashed Nangongja's window last night, the 5 altar masters seemed to have strengthened their supervision of the disciples. No one dared to provoke Nangongja again. Just like that, the days passed peacefully. Nangongja also gradually participated in the management of the Blood Garment Pavilion. Although it was said that he was involved in the management, it was actually just Nangongja attending the regular meetings of the altar masters. To the altar masters, it was just another stool at the side of the table. Since the altar masters had already made up their minds to treat Nangongja like a clay statue, they had to act with an attitude that wouldn't affect anything. The meeting was mainly presided over by Old Man Aoki. Perhaps because of his old age, Old Man Aoki spoke like the 3 generations Hokage of Woodleaf. Not only Qi Yan but even Nangongja was yawning again and again. The Akatsuki organization of the Rain Country has made a commission to our Blood Garment Pavilion. They hope to send a strong person to carry out a mission with them. Qi Yan, Ruijin, who are you going to send? Old Man Aoki said to Qi Yan and Ruijin. This mission was obviously a bit difficult. Ordinary Blood Garment Pavilion disciples couldn't carry it out, so Old Man Aoki brought it up at the altar master meeting. Akatsuki organization? Hearing this name, Nangongja couldn't help but be excited. A long time ago, Nangongja and Jiraiya went to Mount Mayaboku, one of the 3 holy lands, for various reasons. At that time, Liang and Toad Sage had a secret talk for a while. At that time, Liang didn't tell Nangongja the reason, but later he revealed a little bit of information to Nangongja. That person called Jiraiya will receive a disciple who will save the shinobi world in the future. That is, the so-called Child of Prophecy. After Nangongja learned about this, he collected a lot of information about Jiraiya. Originally, the relationship between Nangongja and Shinakushina was not bad. When he was entrusted by the 3 generations to take care of Shinakushina and her son, Nangongja also got a lot of information about Jiraiya. One of them was that Jiraiya once received 3 disciples in the Rain Country, and these 3 disciples were the founders of the Akatsuki organization. He heard that one of them was killed by the demigod Hanzo the Salamander. Now it seems that 2 former disciples named Nagato and Konan are leading the Akatsuki organization. What's more, Itachi Uchiha, his ally, joined the organization after leaving the Woodleaf. This really piqued one's interest. Oh, have you heard of this organization? Aoki saw that Nangongja actually blurted out the name of the Akatsuki organization, and couldn't help but ask. Indeed, this Akatsuki organization does have a little bit of relationship with me. If you don't mind, let me take care of this Akatsuki organization's commission, right? Nangongja stood up and said to the other 5 altar lords. Originally, several altar lords have their own affairs. Such a commission must be carried out by an altar lord, and it won't be mentioned in the altar lords meeting. Since Nangongja wants to solve this problem, isn't it just right? No objection. Since the seat lord wants to go, then naturally we will give it to the seat lord. Akame was the first to express her opinion, as if she was worried that Nangongja would go back on his words. Since the seat lord wants to go, then naturally there is no problem. With the seat lord's strength, dealing with such a small task is naturally easy. Bisui also nodded and said to Nangongja in agreement. Although Ruijin and Ho-Tu didn't speak, they also nodded their heads and agreed with Nangongja's proposal. Letting Nangongja go out for a period of time was naturally good for the altar lords. Although they always wanted to treat Nangongja like a clay sculpture, if Nangongja's brain cramped and slightly complained about the Bloodcloth Pavilion's disciples, then it really wouldn't be a good thing. If Nangongja could stay away from the Bloodcloth Pavilion, then it would be even better. In that case, I will trouble the seat lord with this matter. After this meeting, I will have Bai Shui send the detailed information to Sir Head Seat. Aoki saw that several people didn't have any objection, so he made a conclusion. Then they began to talk about other things, but at this moment, Nangongja's mind had drifted to the Rain Country. Akatsuki organization. Although it was inconvenient to communicate with him, Nangongja still had some information about this organization. It was really interesting. Chapter 192. A gust of wind blew, bringing up the dust on the ground due to the dryness. Although there wasn't much dust, it still made people squint their eyes slightly. Nangongja's body was covered with a white cloak that reached his knees. There was also a hood on the cloak, hiding Nangongja's whole body in the cloak. Nangongja's disaster sword was on his back, revealing only the dark hilt. At this moment, Nangongja was on his way to meet with the members of the Akatsuki. He thought that he would go to the Rain Country to meet with the Akatsuki, But he didn't expect that the Akatsuki's designated meeting place would be the Earth Country. Sure enough, compared to the Fire Country, the Earth Country's climate is a bit harsh, Nangongja complained slightly. In fact, the Earth Country is probably better than the Cloud Country, which is located in the highlands and hills, the Wind Country, which is located in the depths of the desert, and the Water Country, which is surrounded by water. However, compared to the Fire Country, which is the most abundant and comfortable of the 5 countries, there is still a fundamental gap. In the final analysis, the other 4 countries coveted the rich resources and fertile land of the Fire Country, causing wars over and over again. The information given by the Akatsuki was also very simple. They just said that they were going to catch a person and meet him in the Earth Country. Who they were going to catch and what kind of battle plan they had, they didn't disclose any information to the Bloodcloth Pavilion. This shows how careful and cautious the Akatsuki was. Nangongja has been away from the Bloodcloth Pavilion headquarters for nearly a week, and Nangongja himself was already in the hinterland of the Earth Country. Therefore, Nangongja wore clothes that could completely hide him. Nangongja's appearance can be said to be preserved in several ninja villages hostile to the Woodleaf village. Although Nangongja wasn't afraid of facing the Iwagakure people, after all, he was carrying out a mission on behalf of the Bloodcloth Pavilion, so it was best to avoid trouble. Pulling the hood on his head, Nangongja saw the outline of a town in the distance. It seems like it's here? Yes, this town was the place where Nangongja and the Akatsuki's ninja met. I don't know who will come to carry out the mission with me. It can't be Itachi, right? Nangongja was also very curious, in the end who in the Akatsuki organization would carry out the mission with him. If it was Itachi, then that would be the best because some things had to be discussed face to face. The town wasn't far from where Nangongja was. Soon, Nangongja arrived at the entrance of the town. After all, this was a time of peace and there was no huge threat of war between the major ninja villages. It was just an ordinary town, so there was no unusually strict inspection. Nangongja used a little trick to enter the town. Walking in front of a very ordinary-looking house, Nangongja stopped. His eyes narrowed slightly, looking at this very ordinary-looking house very seriously. 1, 7, 14. This is really a tight guard. The Akatsuki has a big plan. In the hinterland of the Earth Country, they can still bring so many ninjas and set up so many hidden sentries. Who do they want to catch? Is it possible that they want to catch the granddaughter of that old man Inoki? Yes, Nangongja was observing the layout of the hidden sentries here. Just a rough observation, Nangongja has already found 14 hidden sentries. Among them, the lowest ninja was an elite chunin. If such people were thrown out to set up hidden sentries, then how strong would the real combat unit be? Moreover, this is the hinterland of the Earth Country. With such a large number of ninjas, it's not so simple to hide from the eyes of the Umbu of Iwagakure. Although Nangongja was very surprised, he was not intimidated to the point of not daring to act. Nangongja directly put his hand on the door of the house, and with a force, the door was directly opened by Nangongja. At the same time, several shadows flashed from the shadows. These ninjas arranged by the Akatsuki to guard the house didn't have the intention to talk to Nangongja. They directly took out their kunai and rushed towards Nangongja. Is this how the Akatsuki treats their guests? Nangongja snorted softly, and his momentum was released without any concealment. Although the ninjas guarding the house were strong, but compared to Nangongja, they were a lot worse. They were directly intimidated by Nangongja's momentum, and even their knees began to tremble slightly. The door of a house in the house was opened, and a female ninja with long purple hair came out. Step back. Although the female ninja's voice wasn't soft, the slightly magnetic voice made people feel that she must be a mature ninja with an extremely firm mind who is used to seeing storms and waves. Several ninjas of the Akatsuki knew that they were not Nangongja's opponent, and their boss ordered them to step back. Naturally, they quickly left Nangongja's range of pressure, and turned into several shadows and returned to their original hiding place. I am Conan of the Akatsuki organization. I don't know which one of the 5 altar lords of the Blood Cloak Pavilion is your distinguished self? Conan looked at Nangongja and asked very calmly. Nangongja was not the enemy of her organization. When Nangongja confronted several ninjas of the Akatsuki organization, Conan already knew. Most of the ninjas of Nangongja's level were not so good-tempered, but Nangongja was obviously facing a sword, but he still didn't kill them. Instead he spread his momentum to control several ninjas of the Akatsuki organization. This was like an invitation, making it clear that he wanted the real person in charge to come out and meet with her. A person who didn't have chakra's fluctuation and didn't have any hostility to the Akatsuki organization, Using a very simple elimination method, she knew that this person should be the person sent by the Blood Cloak Pavilion to assist her in carrying out the mission. And this kind of strength could only be possessed by the Altar Lord of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. Listening to Conan's words, Nangongja also restrained his momentum. I am indeed from the Blood Cloak Pavilion, but I am not the Altar Lord of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. Nangongja gently took off the hood on his head, revealing his face. I am the new leader of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, Nangongja. Chapter 193. When Nangongja said his name, the originally calm Conan's face changed color. Nangongja? Nangongja from Konoha, who is known as Yama? Conan looked at Nangongja with a slightly hostile gaze. It seemed that Conan was not so friendly to Woodleaf and even had a bit of resentment. Woodleaf? That's already in the past. When Danzo made a move on my family, I no longer thought of myself as a Woodleaf ninja. Woodleaf and I have a mutually beneficial relationship. Since they are not benevolent, then I can only be unrighteous with them. Nangongja shook his head, and a strange color appeared in his eyes. Conan saw it very clearly. It was a look of resentment, a look of grief and indignation. It was the same look she saw in the mirror every day. I have no interest in all the dirty things between you and Woodleaf. Since you are here on behalf of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, then just carry out the mission with us. As the Nangongja, I recognize your strength very much. Conan said such a sentence indifferently, then turned around and left, returning to the small room where she was just now. She's not cute at all. Nangongja mumbled. Whoosh. The sound of air being torn apart instantly sounded, and a snow-white shuriken shot towards Nangongja. Although the speed of the shuriken was very fast, it was still very ordinary for Nangongja. Nangongja stretched out his hand, and the sharp white shuriken was already in his hand. The texture of the white shuriken was very strange. It was simply folded from white paper. Be careful when you talk next time. It's very impolite to talk behind people's back. Conan's voice came so leisurely. Although it was still dull, there was a feeling of anger unique to a young girl. Paper release? Nangongja's fingers slightly rubbed the white paper shuriken in his hand, thinking of the scattered information he collected about Conan and Nagato. This ninjutsu seemed to be practiced under the guidance of Jiraiya. Using white paper to perform ninjutsu was originally just a small trick, and it had not yet become a release technique. But with Conan's talent, this ninjutsu using white paper became more and more mature, and now it can be called a release technique similar to a secret technique. If even Conan can do this, then how powerful is Nagato, who is rumored to be more talented than Conan at this moment? Nangongja didn't know because the information he knew was very scattered. Just a little bit of information about Conan and Nagato was the result of Nangongja's hard work. The legendary Child of Prophecy. I wonder which disciple of Jiraiya is he? Conan? Nagato? Or the fourth Hokage who has been wandering in the ninja world with almost no news about him, Watergate? Forget it, forget it. These things are too far away for me to care about. Nangongja had never believed in fate, gods, or Buddhas. Even the sage of the six paths, known as the ancestor of all ninjas, was not born holy. As long as I have enough strength, as long as my faith is firm. Whether it's fate or gods, Nangongja will not hesitate to cut them. Just when Nangongja was still rubbing the paper shuriken in his hand, an Akatsuki ninja came to Nangongja's side. Please follow me to your residence and rest for a while. Knowing that Nangongja was an external aide invited by their organization, the Akatsuki ninja became more respectful. This is the shinobi world. No matter how much you complain about a person in your heart, you can't ignore it. His strength is above you, you have to give him the respect he deserves. Well, lead the way, Nangongja said to the ninja standing next to him. Blood Cloth Pavilion actually chose a leader? This is really bad news. Originally, Blood Cloth Pavilion was managed by 5 altar lords, which in itself will bring a huge loophole to itself. Nagato and Uchiha Madara originally planned to use some means to pull the power of Blood Cloth Pavilion into the Akatsuki. Who would have thought that this Nangongja would pluck the peach instead? It seems that these things need to be discussed at length. Conan's mouth whispered slightly. Although Blood Cloth Pavilion was a hidden force, Conan was still very clear about their situation. Such an organization was only a little weaker than the Akatsuki on the surface. Nagato and Uchiha Madara have been envious of it for a long time. Blood Cloth Pavilion's loose management system also provided an opportunity for the Akatsuki to annex Blood Cloth Pavilion. Originally, the one who was sent to carry out the mission with the Akatsuki was supposed to be an altar lord of Blood Cloth Pavilion. With all kinds of arrangements, Conan was confident that she could pull that person into the Akatsuki. But Nangongja came with the identity of Blood Cloth Pavilion's leader. All of this really disrupted the Akatsuki's plan. Conan stretched out her hand and waved it on a piece of paper in front of her. The white paper immediately moved on its own, but in the blink of an eye, the letter had already turned into a 1,000-paper crane. She held the paper crane in her left hand, and made a hand seal with her right hand, and chakra instantly poured into the paper crane. The paper crane wobbled and waved its white paper wings, and it seemed to adapt to the flight for a while, and then it was slightly pushed out of the window by Conan. Fortunately, my main mission this time is not to take Blood Cloth Pavilion under my command, but to take another person. I will pass the message to Nagato first, and the rest will be handed over to Nagato and Uchiha Madara. A week of long journey indeed made Nangongja's state slightly worse. After a little rest in this house, Nangongja felt that he had almost recovered, but his door was knocked by the Akatsuki's ninja. Nangong-sama. Conan, Sama said that everything is ready and asked you to come and discuss it. Finally, is it time to get down to business? Nangongja was really bored in this house and he already had the idea of starting the mission early and then leaving as soon as possible. After all, this was the hinterland of the Earth Country, plus he had to assist the Akatsuki in carrying out the mission. In order to prevent his whereabouts from being leaked, Nangongja could only stay in the house every day. Okay, I'll go now. Chapter 194. Nangong, Sama, I can only lead you here. Conan Sama and several other Sama are already waiting inside. The Akatsuki ninja who led the way was just an ordinary member, so he couldn't enter the meeting room. He could only lead Nangongja to the entrance of the meeting room. Soke, you can go. I'll trouble you to take care of me these past few days. I'll put in a few good words for you. The ninja who led the way had been taking care of Nangongja's life these past few days, and he took care of him seriously. Nangongja felt that it was necessary to give him some praise. Thank you, Sama. Sure enough, he heard Nangongja's words. The ninja who led the way for Nangongja instantly beamed with joy, and looked at Nangongja with eyes full of gratitude. Waving his hand, Nangongja indicated that the ninja can leave first. Straightening his lapel and brushing his somewhat messy hair, Nangongja opened the door of the meeting room. Before Nangongja could greet Conan, a person's voice suddenly sounded. It's you? Nangongja looked towards the direction of the voice, and saw a ninja with silver hair who was wearing a black robe with red clouds on it pointing his finger at Nangongja. In addition to shock, there was also a lot of anger. Who are you? Why are you pointing at me? Who gave you the courage? Nangongja was also a little angry. He didn't even speak and this person directly jumped out and pointed at his nose. He was giving face to the people of Akatsuki, so they also became arrogant? You actually don't remember me? Very good, very good. I clearly remember that you cut off my limbs and kicked my head like a ball. This time I'll definitely let you know how terrifying Lord Evil God is. The silver-haired ninja's face became very ferocious as if he had gone mad. Break his limbs? Kicking his head like a ball? Why did it sound so familiar? So it's you. Nangongja recalled the time when he brought little Linger and Mashiro to the country of hot water. It was a bloody battlefield as well as the young man from the Cthulhuism Society. I didn't expect that you would still be alive after being tortured to such an extent. Do you have the life of a cockroach? Ignoring the fact that Xiao Nan was still beside him, Nangongja directly used taunt on Fei Dan. Ah! You bastard, Master Fei Duan is going to kill you. No, I want to break all your limbs and let you know the pain that Master Fei Duan suffered that day. Fei Duan was obviously infuriated by Nangongja's attitude. His originally abnormal nerves were now even more strung up. She didn't care that Xiao Nan was still beside her. She took out a scythe with 3 sharp blades and held it in her hand. I'll let you have a taste of the power of the Bloody March scythe. Just as Fei Dan leaped up and stood on the table in the conference room with the scythe in his hand raised high, Conan's slightly angry voice came over. Fei Duan. Are you done? Did I ask you to come here so that you can disobey orders and attack the teammates who are about to carry out the mission with us? Following her voice, countless pieces of white paper also circled around Xiao Nan's body. Xiao Nan stretched out her hand and pointed, and the white paper quickly flew towards Fei Duan as if it had found its target. The clear sound of the white paper breaking through the air was enough to prove the power of the white paper. Seeing that the white paper was about to touch Fei Duan's body, the sound of metal clashing rang out. Only Nangongja was standing in front of Fei Duan, and the disaster sword had been unsheathed. It was Nangongja who blocked these attacks for Fei Duan. I don't know what Sir is doing. I'm clearly educating the person who offended you, but Sir actually blocked these attacks for him? Xiao Nan's face was a little cold. What was this? Someone from her organization came to help her, but in the end he was the enemy of another person who came to help her. She was educating the people from her organization, but was stopped by an outsider? This kind of development indeed made Xiao Nan feel a surge of anger rising in her heart. Xiao Nan, you don't have to be like this. Since Fei Duan wants to take revenge on me, let him come. Otherwise, I won't be at ease letting someone who has been watching my back carry out the mission with me. Since I can defeat him once, I can defeat him more times. With that, Nan Gongzhi looked at Fei Duan behind him with a mocking expression. Don't you think so? Chinibu? *CK your Chinibu, I'm the emissary of the evil god. The emissary. Fei Duan raised the huge scythe in his hand and directly chopped down at Nan Gongzhi's head. Don't be so anxious. This place is so small that it can't be used at all. Let's go to the courtyard and spar. Nan Gongzhi held the disaster sword and blocked the huge scythe that was coming at him. His expression was very relaxed, and it was obvious that he still had enough strength left. He turned the disaster sword in his hand slightly, and the bloody march scythe that Fei Duan used all his strength to chop down heavily on the table. In an instant, the huge table had been split into two. Nan Gongzhi exerted strength in his legs and ran out of the meeting room. He arrived at the slightly spacious courtyard. At this moment, Fei Duan was overwhelmed by his anger. He didn't think much and directly followed Nan Gongzhi to the courtyard. Those two bastards were supposed to act in secret. But now they are fighting. Once the movement is too big, it will attract the rock ninjas. What if the target is alarmed? Looking at the excited Fei Duan and the calm Nan Gongzhi at this moment, Conan was very angry. Are these two people so ignorant of the overall situation? He stomped hard on the ground beneath his feet, just like how Nan Gongzhi and Fei Duan were being stomped on by him. But Conan quickly calmed down and ordered the Akatsuki ninjas who were standing in the courtyard looking at Fei Duan and Nan Gongzhi with a stunned expression. What are you doing? Everyone go to the courtyard wall and start arranging the barrier. Cover up everything in the courtyard. I will look at the two of them. If they make too much trouble, I will stop them in time. This operation has been planned for so long. There must be no mistakes. Conan calmly gave orders to the Akatsuki ninjas. She was like a queen with unparalleled power. Chapter 195. Although Xiao Nan's queenly temperament was very attractive, neither Nan Gongzhi nor Fei Duan had the time to appreciate it. The first time the two of them fought was several years ago. At that time, Fei Duan had just completed the sacrificial ritual for the Cthulhu. He had not yet familiarized himself with the Cthulhu's undying ability, so that battle was almost meaningless to the two of them now. Whether it was Nan Gongzhi or Fei Duan, both of them had grown over the years. The two of them needed to be extra careful in this battle. The bloody march scythe in Fei Duan's hand was slightly glowing with a bloody brilliance under the sunlight. It was obvious that it had drunk the blood of many enemies. Nan Gongzhi's majestic inner strength and sword energy were also constantly emitted. The originally slightly undulating ground began to flatten under the impact of Nan Gongzhi's inner strength and sword energy. The battle was about to start. The confrontation between the two of them was an action that tested the temperament of both sides. Compared to Nan Gongzhi, Fei Duan was obviously more inclined to launch the first round of attack himself. Fei Duan roared, and the chakra on his body began to flow to his feet and hands, increasing his physical fitness. Even the ground had a small pit because of Fei Duan's power. The bloody march scythe was a heavy weapon, especially when Fei Duan used the chakra to stimulate his body and unleash an extremely tyrannical power. The bloody march scythe almost left an afterimage in the air, and the ear-piercing sound of it breaking through the air was so clear. Nan Gongzhi knew that if he wanted to defeat Fei Duan, the most important thing was that he absolutely could not let Fei Duan collect his blood. This was the most important rule when dealing with the followers of the Cthulhuism society. Although he was not the first to attack, Nan Gongzhi relied on his speed and skills to make his sword speed reach an extremely high level. The sword was like a venomous snake that had been lying dormant for a long time, revealing its venomous fangs, piercing towards Fei Duan from an extremely tricky angle. The two of them were very fast, and in an instant they were already standing opposite each other. At this time, Fei Duan's face revealed a slightly cruel smile. The bloody march scythe's long handle had unknowingly turned into a chain. Originally, Fei Duan was holding the bloody march scythe with both hands and slashing towards Nan Gongzhi, but now he had already grabbed the end of the chain. The bloody march scythe's speed became even faster under the effect of inertia, and swept towards Nan Gongzhi's neck. You've really learned. But what's the point of such a small trick? Bloody march side, bloody march sides, bloody march side, bloody march side, bloody march. But he was still very calm. His rights, he held the side, bloody march. Nangongja held the heavenly calamity sword simple and unadorned scabbard in his left hand. This was the bloody side, the scythe march, the march, bloody march, with the was held, as blood-eating. A crisp sound rang out as Nangongja blocked the three-moon sickle with his ordinary-looking black scabbard. That's right, the scabbard and the hilt of the heavenly tribulation sword were made of the same material. It was extremely hard. Fei Duan knew that the three-moon sickle wouldn't be of any use this time, so he shook his wrist, wanting to take the three-moon sickle into his hand. It's useless. Nangongja exerted force with his left hand and used a skillful technique to entangle the three-moon scythe with his scabbard. The three-moon sickle seemed to be glued to the three-moon sickle, and there was no way to retrieve it. Although you have an immortal body, if I were to blind one of your eyes, your battle prowess would definitely decrease a lot, right? That's right. Originally, Nangongja's sword looked like it was going to stab Fei Duan's abdomen, but Nangongja's wrist turned and stabbed Fei Duan's eyes. Go ahead and try. Do you think I, Master Fei Duan, am so easy to deal with? Obviously, his weapon had been restrained by Nangongja. One of his hands couldn't do anything because he was unwilling to give up his weapon, but Fei Duan didn't seem to be worried that he would be blinded by Nangongja at all. Instead, he laughed and ridiculed Nangongja. A trick? Nangongja knew that Fei Duan must have some tricks up his sleeve. Sure enough, Fei Duan's other hand suddenly took out an iron rod with a sharp spike at the end. It stabbed toward Nangongja's body. The iron rod was only about 20 centimeters long. It was just like a strangely shaped dagger. Nangongja decided to give up this attack and directly used the heavenly tribulation sword to push away the iron rod. Just as he was about to pull away and make a second attack, the black iron rod suddenly elongated. Retreat. 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 He absolutely couldn't let his blood fall into Fei Duan's hands. Nangongja used his internal force to stimulate his legs, and his speed soared again and again. However, the iron rod elongated faster and faster. The iron rod was getting closer and closer to Nangongja's abdomen. 3 centimeters, 2 centimeters, 1 centimeter. Seeing that Nangongja was about to be stabbed by the iron rod. Ha! You bastard, just die under the power of Master Fei Duan and Master Cthulhu. Fei Duan was very excited. He felt that he had won this round. Nangongja's panicked movement to avoid the iron rod suddenly stopped. Because of the rapid retreat, his slightly bent body and lowered head were now standing straight. You think you won? Fei Duan looked carefully. Although his iron rod was very close to Nangongja's abdomen, it still didn't touch Nangongja's body. Just a little bit. A little bit. Originally, I thought that after these few years, you should have made some progress. But other than learning these strange moves, it seems that you haven't improved much. Boring. Nangongja's face didn't have the nervous expression at the beginning of the battle. Instead, it was very relaxed. As if he didn't put Fei Duan in his eyes, he spoke to Nangongja like an elder educating a child. Ah. Back then, you had this expression on your face when you humiliated me to such an extent. I once swore that I must let you have a taste of humiliation. But now you are still looking at me with this expression. What do you have? What do you have? Master Fei Duan, even if I get seriously injured, I will let you know how powerful I am. I will let you experience the power of Lord Evil God. Chapter 196. Fei Duan's angry words did not frighten Nangongja. Instead, it was as if he had told a particularly funny joke, making Nangongja laugh. The more Nangongja laughed, the fiercer Fei Duan's anger became. What you said is quite nice, but you want to defeat me with this. You want to humiliate me? You're still far from it. You'd better train for another 10 years. This time, Fei Duan was no longer the first to attack. Because Nangongja was the first to attack. The Heaven's Calamity Sword was covered with a layer of blue brilliance, and countless fine sword chi surrounded the Heaven's Calamity Sword. The sword chi cut through the air, and even the Heaven's Calamity Sword began to become a little blurry. Originally, you weren't worth me using this move, but after all, I just learned it and I still need someone to practice the sword. You who can't die came at the right time. I'll let you try the power of this Ghost God Sword. That's right, Nangongja was using the Ghost God Sword Fatal 14th Sword, which he had used when his heart demon had crushed him. Although Nangongja had a more powerful and suitable Ghost God Sword, it was too much of a burden on Nangongja's body, so Nangongja was not willing to use it easily. As for the fatal 14th sword, most of the pressure was concentrated on the sword, and the pressure on the human body was relatively small. Using Fei Duan to test the sword was a spontaneous idea. His left hand turned into a sword finger, and gently stroked the spine of the Heaven's Calamity sword. Countless murderous aura and hostility were emitted from Nangongja's body. Even behind Nangongja, a ferocious shadow of Yama appeared. Nangongja's eyes were gradually covered with blood, especially the pupils, which had turned into a rich blood color. When Nangongja's body rose and fell slightly because of his breathing, the red in his eyes seemed to spread out, leaving a red light mark in the air. Conan stood on the edge of the battle between Haydn and Nangongja. At the beginning, when Nangongja and Haydn fought head-on, their level was actually not that high. He was simply relying on his own physical fitness to wield the weapon in his hand like a barbarian. Conan even thought that the rumors about Nangongja in the ninja world were false. Legend has it that Nangongja's teachings and even better than white. Such a battle was really disappointing. However, when Nangongja's heavenly calamity sword was covered with internal energy and sword energy, Xiaonan finally understood. The only one who had truly used his full strength was actually Flying Duan. Nangongja just played with Haydn, and wanted to test Haydn's strength. Whether it was Nangongja's murderous aura and hostility, or Nangongja's state at the moment, Conan was shocked. Even Nagato, who had the Rinnegan, and the masked man who called himself Uchiha Madara, they didn't have the same state as Nangongja when fighting. If she had to use a word to describe it, perhaps only born to fight was appropriate. Putting everything aside, whether it was his own body or all his emotional fluctuations have been removed from Nangongja's body. At this time, Nangongja just wanted to stab with his sword. Haydn was trapped by Nangongja's murderous aura and hostility. It was as if the surroundings were filled with cement, and he couldn't move at all. There are many genjutsu that can do this, such as some of the secret genjutsu of Konoha Village's Yugi family. If it was in genjutsu, then there were naturally many ways to solve it. But Nangongja at this moment was purely relying on his murderous aura and hostility to deter the opponent. Unless the opponent's murderous aura and hostility surpassed Nangongja's, or there was a crushing gap in strength, there was no way to get rid of Nangongja's comfort. Obviously, Haydn didn't meet any of the conditions mentioned above. Conan wanted to go up and stop the battle between the two people. The real mission hasn't started yet, but they were already in a mess. Not only would it have no good impact on the later mission, but more importantly, it would weaken the strength of their side. Their target wasn't someone who was easy to deal with either. It wasn't a good sign to let their strength weaken at this time. But when Conan walked to the edge of the space formed by Nangongja's murderous aura and hostility, Conan found that even she had no way to invade and stop Nangongja and Haydn. This matter was troublesome. Fortunately, Haydn was immortal. So be it, let Haydn have a good taste of his lesson. It could also be considered as Haydn restraining his bad temper, right? Conan couldn't take any action, and Haydn couldn't even move. He could only watch as Nangongja's sword got closer and closer to him. Haydn could already feel the chill on the sword's edge. His body, which had become slightly sluggish because of his immortal body, was now extremely sensitive to the dangerous aura on the sword's edge. His hair stood on end just like that. Haydn's eyes could still move, and Haydn's thoughts could still move. Nangongja's sword would directly pierce through his throat, Haydn guessed. Haydn could almost imagine his throat being pierced, and his blood constantly gushing out from his throat. That feeling of suffocation, that feeling of his body losing its warmth. A kind of fear burned in Haydn's heart like a fire. He didn't feel the usual pleasure of facing death with the enemy when he was injured. There was only the fear of being injured and the helplessness of not being able to control his life in his own hands. It was really a very annoying feeling. Haydn could only close his eyes as if he had accepted his fate. Anyway, he couldn't escape Nangongja's attack. At most, it would be like a few years ago where Nangongja cut off his limbs. So what if it hurt a little? 1 second, 2 seconds, a long time had passed, but Haydn still didn't feel the sword cutting through his body. Strange? What was this bastard Nangongja doing? Fei Duan could only slowly open his eyes, wanting to see what his enemy was doing. Nangongja's smiling face was reflected in Haydn's eyes. The Heaven's Disaster Sword's edge was only a little away from Haydn's neck, just hanging there. Was this bastard Nangongja humiliating him? This was the only thought left in Haydn's mind. Chapter 197. Nangongja turned his wrist, shook the Heaven's Disaster Sword in his hand, and put the Heaven's Disaster Sword back into the scabbard. You Are you humiliating me? Are you pitying me? Haiden's sensitive nerves were once again stimulated by Nangongzhi. It seemed that he wanted to use the bloody March sickle to fight with Nangongzhi again. Nangongzhi glanced at Haiden coldly, then turned his head and no longer looked at Haiden. "Ah, you bastard, you dare to look down on this uncle?" Haiden roared and was about to attack, but Conan's slightly cold voice had already reached Haiden's ears. "Haven't you made enough trouble?" Haiden. Hearing Conan's voice, Haiden's body trembled. Haiden was the kind of person who didn't submit to anyone. When Nangongzhi cut off his hands and feet and chopped his head, he was brought to the Akatsuki. Haiden was naturally restless, and he often provoked other Akatsuki members. As the person who helped Nagato manage the Akatsuki, Conan naturally couldn't ignore Haiden's behavior. She directly tied Haiden's hands and feet, hung him in a square where people often gathered in the Akatsuki, and used her paper release to cut off Haiden's flesh little by little. Haiden was indeed immortal, but he still felt pain. When Haiden was about to faint, Conan would inject a highly concentrated nutrient solution for Haiden, so that Haiden could recover quickly with the nutrient solution, and then continue to cut the flesh on Haiden's body with the sharp blade made of white paper. This lesson lasted for an entire 3 days. From then on, Haiden may talk nonsense to other people, but he still instinctively trembled in front of Conan. Whether it was the provocation to Nangongzhi or the battle with Nangongzhi, it was actually discussed with Conan before. Although it may be a bit noisy, it was still carried out with Conan's acquiescence. Now Xiaonan's reprimand made Fei Duan calm down. Fei Dan glared fiercely at Nangongzhi and put away the weapon in his hand. He stood silently behind Xiaonan, not saying a word. Nangongzhi saw everything clearly. The twists and turns of the story were very clear in his mind. However, there were some things that were best understood in one's heart. Saying it out loud would only make everyone feel awkward. There was no point in it at all. Then, can we talk about the proper business now? After all, some troublesome matters have been settled. Nangongzhi glanced at Fei Duan, who was standing behind Xiaonan. However, Fei Duan didn't seem to hear Nangongzhi's words as he stood there silently. Of course, we've already determined the target's location. The battle plan has basically been formulated, but after seeing your strength today, I think we can slightly improve the battle plan. Xiaonan looked at Nangongzhi and nodded. At the same time, there seemed to be an imperceptible smile on her face. It doesn't matter. You can decide. On the foreign aid you invited. You came up with a battle plan. As long as I can execute it, I will naturally cooperate with you. Nangongzhi was really not interested in changing the battle plan. Here is the target's information. Xiaonan waved her hand and an Akatsuki ninja took a folder in front of Nangongzhi. Reaching out and taking the folder in his hand, Nangongzhi flipped through the document casually. The disciple of Tsuchikage? It's really a big deal. You dare to make a move on Inoki's disciple? Nangongzhi didn't take long to know who the enemy he was about to face was. It was the disciple of the current Tsuchikage Deidara. Some of Deidara's deeds were quite detailed in the information. He was simply an explosive maniac. Many crazy attack missions were carried out by this Deidara. He was arrogant and crazy. Nangongzhi even wondered whether Inoki wanted to cultivate a disciple or a killing machine. Although Deidara now had the title of rebellious ninja, Nangongzhi didn't think that Inoki had given up on Deidara. Now that Akatsuki wants to reach out to Tsuchikage, it means that many secrets about Iwagakure will be revealed in front of Akatsuki. This matter is not easy to deal with. No wonder Deidara's strength was average, but Akatsuki still spent a lot of money to invite people from Blood Cloak Pavilion to carry out the mission together. You are taking advantage of Inoki's tiger whiskers. Although this old man is indeed old, but if he really explodes, not many people can stop him. Nangongzhi shook his head slightly and threw the information about Deidara in his hand on the table. Deidara was originally a rebellious ninja of Iwagakure. Naturally, he won't get close to Iwagakure. As long as we find the right opportunity, we can catch Deidara before Iwagakure can react. No matter how powerful Inoki is, as long as he follows to Akatsuki, we will naturally have a way to deal with him. Conan said confidently. Nangongzhi didn't know, but Conan knew that Iwagakure and Akatsuki actually had various transactions. Both sides were well aware of each other's strength. Akatsuki showed Inoki's strength. Although it wasn't enough to compete with Iwagakure, it was enough to bring a lot of trouble to Iwagakure. There is only 1,000 days of being a thief, how can there be 1,000 days of guarding against thieves? Once what's done is done, with Inoki's shrewd character, he can naturally make the right choice. Forget it, anyway it's your Akatsuki. As long as you can bear all the consequences, I don't need to worry about you. When it's time to act, just call me. Nangongja turned around and was about to leave, but he was stopped by Conan. Sir Nangong, please wait a moment. Please take this. Conan handed over a black robe that was very similar to the one worn by Haydn and Conan. This is the uniform of our senior members. Since you are now employed by us, why don't you wear it when performing tasks? It can help you hide your appearance. It's always good to have less trouble. He didn't know if Conan had investigated Nangongja, but she knew that Nangongja was afraid of trouble. Nangongja didn't know how to refute this. He could only take the black robe from Conan's hand, nodded and left. Chapter 198. Time always moved forward on its own, not allowing anyone to explain. The sun set in the west and the moon rose in the east. The stars in the sky embellished the black curtain, emitting their own brilliance. Nangongja sat on the roof of the house that seemed to be a little narrow. The green jade gourd was beside him and a jade cup was beside him. The clear wine was sitting quietly in the cup. Nangongja reached out and took the cup. With a flip of his wrist, all the wine entered Nangongja's mouth. The rich but elegant wine fragrance lingered in Nangongja's mouth. Nangongja squinted his eyes slightly, seemingly savoring the wonderful taste of the drunken immortal wine. I didn't expect that the legendary Yama, who killed people like scything flax, was also a glutton for wine. A cold voice broke the silence of the night. A girl with long purple hair, dressed in a loose black robe with red clouds on it, stood behind Nangongja without anyone noticing. Xiao Nan had a playful expression on her face, as if she had caught Nangongja's pigtail. Glutton for wine? Not really. One of my seniors really likes to drink wine. I don't know when I was led astray by him. Although the wine in the cup is sometimes a hindrance, I feel that without it, there is not much taste left. Nangongja smiled embarrassedly, as if he did not take Xiao Nan's words to heart. He was just reminiscing about the past. Xiao Nan did not continue on this topic. Instead, she silently walked to Nangongja's side. She picked up the green jade gourd, and her nose twitched a few times as she poured the wine into the gourd. This is a good wine. As she spoke, she opened her right hand, and a few pieces of white paper danced on top of it. After a while, a wine cup made of paper was held in Xiao Nan's hand. He glanced at Nangongja as if asking if he could have a taste of the wine. Nangongja also smiled. Just a moment ago he was still saying that he was a glutton for alcohol. But now he picked up his wine and wanted to ask if he could have a sip? Lil Nan was an interesting person. This wine is the drunken immortal brew. It was given to me by my senior. There was no one in this world who knew how to brew it, so it was better to drink it a little. Since little Nan wants to give it a try, it's naturally possible. After Nangongja introduced the name of the wine, he agreed to Xiao Nan's request. Xiao Nan seemed to have taken advantage of something. She took the green jade gourd and poured a cup of wine into the paper cup in her hand. Holding the glass of wine, Xiao Nan sat down beside Nangongja. In front of them was the open space where Nangongja and Fei Duan fought during the day. Although the Akatsuki's ninjas also cleaned up, the traces of the battle were still so obvious. Fighting and war always destroy all the beauty in the world. For no reason, Xiao Nan actually sighed with emotion. After all, Nangongja collected some information about the 3 disciples of Jiraiya in the Rain Country. They were all orphans in the war. Their hatred for war and fighting must be deep in their bones. So, you are working hard to quell the war? Nangongja didn't directly say who the so-called you were, but Xiao Nan knew very well that he was talking about Yahiko, Nagato, and herself. We just happened to find a feasible way to quell the war and we are working hard for it. Xiao Nan didn't know why, but in front of Nangongja, she didn't suppress all the things in her heart like usual. Instead, she directly said what she wanted to say. Xiao Nan wasn't a particularly opinionated person. When Xiao Nan, Yahiko, and Nagato were orphans in the Rain Country, they were struggling to survive. At that time, Xiao Nan just wanted to survive. Later, she met Jiraiya and became his disciple. She founded the Akatsuki and became an important member. In fact, a lot of it was because of Yahiko and Nagato, who struggled to survive together with her since childhood. When Yahiko was killed by Danzo and Hanzo, Xiao Nan didn't know what she was pursuing. The resentment and helplessness in her heart made Xiao Nan want to help Nagato realize Yahiko's last wish. Since then, she has been working hard for this ridiculous big plan. She became the messenger of God under Nagato. Isn't that a great thing? There is no one in this world who doesn't want to live in a peaceful world. It's very commendable that you can muster the courage to take this step. Perhaps it's because of the few glasses of wine? Nangongji's words gradually became more and more. Speaking of which, my experience is similar to yours. My parents and the place where I lived were also destroyed by a group of people. Since then, I have been wandering in the ninja world relying on my sister. But maybe it's because of my good fortune I have some strength, so I joined the Woodleaf to seek protection. Nangongji seemed to be thinking about his life, and he talked about the most difficult days of his life so far. Listening to Nangongji's words, Xiaonan also seemed to remember the days when she, Yahiko, and Nagato relied on each other. After joining the Woodleaf, I killed a lot of people, but every time I told myself that every person I killed was for my sister, for the people I cared about. Because only in this way can I let them live a better and safer life under the protection of the Woodleaf. You didn't do anything wrong. Xiaonan seemed to see Nangongji's inner struggle. As a person who doesn't like to take other people's lives, Nangongji's thoughts at this moment, Xiaonan felt that she could empathize with him. I used to think that I didn't do anything wrong, but Danzo made a move on my family. Nangongji shook his head. When he said Danzo's name, he still tightly held the glass in his hand and poured the wine directly into his mouth. He didn't have the same expression as before, he just looked like he was venting. Danzo. Danzo? Xiaonan also murmured Danzo's name in her mouth. The scene of Yahiko's death replayed in Xiaonan's mind over and over again. After drinking the wine in the glass, she gently threw the paper cup in her hand away. Xiaonan got up and walked away, leaving only one sentence echoing in the air. Tomorrow's action. Chapter 199. Nangongji was waiting for the target to be lured over by Akatsuki's ninjas. Along with Nangongji, Haiden and Conan were also here to ambush him. In the ninja world, when there is an absolute gap in strength, the number of people doesn't have much meaning. It's like Akatsuki has arranged dozens of almost elite ninjas to besiege Deidara, but they don't expect them to have any achievements. They are all bait to attract Deidara. Get ready, the target is about to enter the visible range. Nangongji heard a faint voice with a few traces of coldness. Turning his head, Conan was also staring at him. Nodding, Nangongji signaled that he understood. Before Nangongji could say anything, a huge explosion sound came from the distance. You dregs, you dare to provoke Deidara? I will let you see how powerful the art of explosion is. A blond man riding a big bird that seemed to be made out of mud shouted loudly. And the several ninjas of Akatsuki organization were also injured, and their faces were covered with dirt. Nangongji couldn't help but look at Haiden, who was also ambushing on the other side. Sure enough, this group of Chinibu likes to call themselves uncle? Haiden also noticed Nangongji's gaze, although he didn't know what Nangongji was thinking. But Nangongji's face was still so annoying in Haiden's eyes. If it weren't for big sister Conan here, I wouldn't want to have a good fight with you. Uncle Haiden must beat your face with a smirk until it bleeds. Haiden's heart was crazy at this moment, and he seemed to have forgotten that he was almost pressed to the ground by Nangongji. In fact, Conan's plan for Nangongji and Haiden is quite simple. Nangongji will face Deidara head-on, and Conan will wander around and try to take away Deidara's blood, and then Haiden will use Jutsu, death spell, to directly make Deidara lose his combat power. Deidara was forcibly taken away, and naturally Akatsuki has various means to make him join. But Nangongji looked at Deidara's appearance, and he always felt that something was wrong. Deidara's battle mainly relies on a variety of explosive clay to attack. Although the attack power of explosive clay is indeed high, the movement caused by it is not small. Deidara was chasing after a few elite Chunin ninjas of the Akatsuki organization, and he looked like he was going to blow up this rare forest of the Earth country. Such an undisguised arrogant behavior as the Umbu of Iwagakure, how can they not notice it? Nangongji felt more and more that in fact, Deidara has always been under the surveillance of the insidious old man Inoki. The reason why Deidara can openly act as a traitor in the ninja world, there must be more things that he doesn't know. It seems that he really has to do his best to end this battle quickly. Otherwise, Inoki, who has the dust-release Kekkei Genkai, will really be attracted here. Even if Nangongji, Conan, and Haiden join forces, they can't say that they will be safe. Just when Nangongji was still thinking about all kinds of things, Deidara launched a new round of attacks. Deidara put his hands into the small bag at his waist, and a mouth appeared on the palms of both hands, constantly swallowing the clay in the bag. Not only swallowing but also chewing. Fortunately, Nangongji was still far away from Deidara, so he couldn't see it clearly. Otherwise, with Nangongji's slight misophobia at this moment, he definitely couldn't help but run out and give this disgusting guy a sword. How dare he use such a disgusting method? Explosive clay, flying bird. Several bird-like clay figurines appeared in Daidara's hand. When Daidara shouted the name of the ninjutsu he used, these clay figurines of birds seemed to come alive, and rushed straight towards the Akatsuki's ninja who was still running for his life in front of him. Although the clay figurines were made of clay, their speed was extremely fast, and they were already behind several Akatsuki ninjas. Ah! Die. Art is explosion. Ah! Daidara put his hands together and made a violent shout. The clay birds were like bombs whose fuses had been ignited. They kept expanding and turning red. They exploded in an instant. The Akatsuki ninjas who were followed by the clay figurines were naturally the first to bear the brunt. Their backs were scorched black and a lot of blood overflowed from their mouths. Obviously, they suffered a very serious internal injury, and if they are not treated in time they will die. Nangongja tightly held the Heaven's Disaster Sword in his hand, and seemed to be ready to go out and fight with Daidara. Although the Akatsuki ninjas had nothing to do with him at this moment, they were fighting side by side, and they were already in danger in front of him. Nangongja felt that he couldn't just ignore the threat to their lives. However, Conan's cold eyes were only staring at Nangongja, and her eyes obviously wanted to prevent Nangongja from going out. Is this the person who said to me last night that she would save the ninja world and quell the war? Nangongja's heart was inevitably disappointed. Through the continuous sacrifice of trusted people, people continued to lose their lives, and the flow of blood in exchange for peace. Can it really be a long-term peace? Suddenly, Nangongja felt that he had actually seen what kind of organization the Akatsuki was through such a little detail. In Nangongja's view, recruiting madmen like Haiden and Daidara was justifiable. After all, in this ninja world there were too few powerful people who could be recruited. But sacrificing his subordinates and people who believed in him without changing his expression? Nangongja knew that he couldn't do it. His heart was cold and he was not willing to risk his life. Nangongja knew that he just wanted to complete his task peacefully. This so-called Akatsuki organization is really a rotten organization with a golden exterior. They dare to call themselves Akatsuki? Usher in the bright dawn of the ninja world? Don't be ridiculous. If the ninja world has really declined to the point where it needs such a group of people to save it, it's better to just wait for death. Conan didn't know the many thoughts in Nangongja's heart, but seeing Nangongja put down the Heaven's Disaster Sword in his hand, she didn't say anything. She just stared at Daidara and the group of ninjas who attracted Daidara's attention, waiting for the opportunity. Chapter 200. Daidara was getting closer and closer to the place where Nangongja was, but every time he got a little bit closer, an Akatsuki ninja would get injured or even die. Although Nangongja was determined not to care about their life and death, but every time Akatsuki ninja's aura got weaker and weaker, Nangongja's heart also became colder and colder. The favorable impression of the Akatsuki organization that had just been born was being worn down little by little like this. Finally, when the ninjas of Akatsuki organization were either dead or injured, only 2 or 3 of them were left, Daidara finally came down from the back of that big bird he was riding. Standing in front of the few remaining Akatsuki ninjas, he said with a somewhat crazy face, "It's been a long time since someone dared to provoke this uncle. Since you came, then have a good taste of this uncle's means. So that in the future, no matter what kind of trash, dare to disturb this uncle." Daidara's palm's mouth was constantly squirming, and in Daidara's hand appeared several freehand-looking spider clay sculptures. C1, clay spider. He threw those clay spiders at his feet and made 3 hand seals. The spiders were injected with vitality, and began to slowly crawl toward the mouth of Akatsuki ninjas. If everything goes smoothly, these spiders will certainly crawl into the mouth of Akatsuki ninjas, and enter their stomach through their esophagus, and then explode. The power of clay spiders is not big, but after entering the human body and then exploding, it will only make people feel that their vitality is leaving the body. This is really very interesting. Daidara seemed to be able to see the situation after the clay spiders explode, and a cruel and excited expression lingered on Daidara's face. In the end, Nangongja couldn't bear it anymore. If it was a frontal battle on the battlefield, no matter how many people died, Nangongja would not have this kind of mood like now. But at this moment, Daidara's almost powerless Akatsuki ninjas were executing such a sadistic behavior, Nangongja really couldn't stand it anymore. Nangongja had always thought that he had gotten over the destruction of the village he grew up in and the death of his parents. However, such a scene reminded Nangongja of the raging inferno and the heart-wrenching cries. Damn it! Nangongja charged out with the Heaven's Calamity Sword in hand. Xiaonan noticed Nangongji's behavior. However, since Nangongji had already rushed out, they could only bring forward the plan. Conan nodded at Fei Duan, indicating for him to wait for her and Nangongji to take Dedale's blood. Then she followed Nangongji out. Oh, I didn't expect there to be an ambush. Seeing Nangongji and Conan's clothes were slightly similar to Akatsuki's ninjas, Dedale knew that Nangongji and Conan were here to ambush him. Although there was no way to know the exact strength of Nangongji and Xiaonan, Dedale was confident that he could get away with it since he only had 2 enemies. He made a few hand seals, and the clay bird that had fallen beside him rushed toward Nangongji and Conan as if it had received an order. "Let me show you my art." Dedale clasped his hands together and shouted, "Art is explosion, drink." Whether it was the giant bird that flew toward Nangongji and Conan or the clay spider that had entered the mouth of Akatsuki ninjas, they all exploded at this moment. Countless dust rose under the effect of the explosion. "Humph, no matter how strong you are, you will be injured under such a large amount of explosive clay. You drink this uncle's foot washing water." Haydn looked at the direction of the explosion and laughed, seemingly ridiculing Nangongji and Conan for overestimating themselves. At the same time, he also looked down at his feet that were stained with the blood of Akatsuki ninjas, and slightly disdainfully curled his lips. "This uncle had just changed his shoes, but because of you, you dirted them. Just letting you die like this is really a bit of a loss, ah." Without waiting for Dedale to continue to complain about his shoes being dirted, the smoke and dust that filled the sky was cut off by a sword energy at this moment. Nangongji still maintained the posture of waving his sword, and beside Nangongji's body, there were still a few pieces of white paper that were still burning. Obviously, Conan used her paper ninjutsu to know that a layer of wall had blocked the explosion of the clay bird for Nangongji. At this moment, a pair of snow-white wings made of white paper had grown out of Conan's back, and even Conan's face seemed to have changed as if a piece of paper had been peeled off. "Dedale, on behalf of Akatsuki, I welcome you to join the embrace of God." At this moment, Conan was like a messenger of God, floating in the air. Her face was full of coldness and pity, like an angel who was appointed by God to come to the earth. "God? I don't know how gorgeous it would be when God explodes." Hearing Conan say the name of God, Dedale not only didn't have a little bit of timidity, but as if he had thought of a good idea, his face was full of excitement. If he could blast a god into the sky, how beautiful would that be? "Blasphemous people of God, I will bestow you the punishment of God." Nangongji was slightly speechless looking at Conan. Although he knew that Conan's nickname was God's messenger, but it was the first time that Nangongji had seen Conan become a fraud. He was simply a fraud who had reached a certain level. "Ha ha ha ha. I'll start with you, God's messenger." Dedale, who had been hiding behind his back, suddenly opened his hands, and white clay unceasingly spat out from his palms. This clay seemed to have received guidance, and slowly formed a dragon-shaped clay sculpture behind Dedale. "Have a taste of my C2 giant dragon's power." Along with Dedale's voice, the dormant dragon behind Dedale suddenly opened its eyes. This so-called C2 dragon had 2 wings on its back. At this moment, the dragon flapped its wings. Its huge body flew up like this, and at this moment, its huge body was almost level with Conan, who was staying in the sky. The dragon opened its mouth, and a mass of white explosive clay was spat out by the dragon, flying towards Conan. And Conan naturally knew that as long as this clay approached her, it would certainly explode, so the white wings behind Conan unceasingly split into pieces of white paper and rushed towards the mass of clay formed by the explosive clay. Chapter 201. The sound of explosions was incessant. It was like a fireworks show on a summer night, and the sky was filled with dazzling brilliance. Although Nangongji knew a little about Xiaonan's strength through his previous investigation, when Xiaonan really used her paper to fight against Dedale, Nangongji felt that he had underestimated Xiaonan. It was clearly such a soft and fragile paper, but in Xiaonan's hands, it changed endlessly. One moment it was like a blade, the next it was like a shield, and it could even turn into wings to let her fly in the sky. "I can't let you monopolize the limelight like this." Nangongji didn't know why, but he felt a tinge of anger in his heart. Seeing Xiaonan fight wantonly like a valkyrie on the battlefield, even Nangongji's somewhat low desire to fight was ignited. Nangongji held the tribulation sword in his hand. Countless sword chi constantly emerged from the tribulation sword, constantly wrapping around the tribulation sword. He let go of the sword, and the tribulation sword floated in front of him. At this moment, the sword chi was no longer a sharp weapon for attacking, but like pieces of building blocks that were constantly pieced together. Not long after, a long dragon formed by sword chi appeared in front of him. Nangongja waved his hand, and the tribulation sword, which had been wrapped into a ball, flew towards the dragon's head. The entire sword chi dragon was instantly activated. The huge dragon roared towards the sky, and the dragon's roar was earth-shattering. Even Xiao Nan and Dead Ale, who were focused on the battle, couldn't help but be attracted by the scene here. Nangongja slowly stepped into the sword chi dragon's reverse scale. Then, the sword chi dragon immediately soared into the sky and arrived next to Dedale's C2 dragon. Nangongja didn't say anything and just gave Xiao Nan a look. According to the battle plan, Nangongja was the one who should be entangled with Dead Ale, and Xiao Nan should be waiting for an opportunity to obtain Dedale's blood. Nangongja's expression was noticed by Xiao Nan, and she instantly understood. She flapped her wings and distanced herself from Dead Ale. Hey woman. We haven't finished fighting yet. Why are you running away? After seeing Conan retreat, Dead Ale said with dissatisfaction. Wouldn't it be better for me to be your opponent? Long-range attacks are really boring. Nangongja looked at Dead Ale, who seemed to be angry, and said with a smile. What do you know? When my art explodes, no matter near or far, I will feel happy. I haven't even finished speaking and you've already made a move. Is it that boring? That's right. When Dead Ale was still talking about his own artistic views, Nangongja had already rushed towards Dead Ale with a long sword chi dragon. The long sword chi dragon was composed of sword chi. As the chi of martial arts, the lethality of sword chi was naturally self-evident. When Nangongja's long sword chi dragon and Dedale's C2 dragon brushed past each other, the sword chi of Nangongja's long sword chi dragon suddenly erupted. Like peeling a potato, it abruptly scraped a lot of clay from the C2 dragon. The clay immediately exploded under the stimulation of sword chi, and there was a lot of explosion smoke in the air. However, the long sword chi dragon was like a fish in the river. It was free and did not receive the slightest impact. Dead Ale was squatting on the C2 dragon's body, commanding it. The shockwave of the explosion naturally affected Dead Ale, causing his body to sway for a while. In the past, it was his own explosive clay that made his opponents confused, but this time it was him who got hit. The feeling of being pecked in the eye by a wild goose made Dedale's heart very uncomfortable. Ah! You bastard, this uncle will not let you go. You just wait for this uncle to blow you into a piece of black charcoal. I guarantee that your mother won't recognize you. Speaking of which, since Dead Ale became a ninja, it was basically smooth sailing. He became the disciple of Iwagakure's Tsuchikage, carried out many dangerous tasks. Even if he defected from the ninja village, he lived a carefree life. He was even happier than when he was a ninja in Iwagakure. It was really fun to bully ninjas who were weaker than him. But this time, Nangongja and the others actually dared to go against him, making him suffer a little loss in front of his most proficient explosive ninjutsu. This really made Dedale's mind very confused. Looking at Dedale's furious look, Nangongja could only chuckle embarrassedly. In Dedale's eyes, Nangongja's image at the moment overlapped with the image of the old man Inoki. Obviously, there was no reprimand, but the look in his eyes clearly said, "Kid, don't be so mischievous, you won't be cute if you continue like this." The reason why Dead Ale defected from Iwagakure was because he felt that he didn't get the attention he deserved. Nangongja's eyes at the moment were like coaxing a child, and it hurt Dedale's sensitive and fragile heart. Explosive clay, two-winged bird. The mouth in Dedale's hand suddenly wriggled and spat out several clay birds with 2 wings. It was similar to the small birds that chased the Akatsuki's ninja. With a few hand seals, the 2-winged bird was also activated. The 2-winged bird's speed was far faster than the small birds released when chasing the Akatsuki's ninja. It was like a sharp arrow rushing toward Nangongja. Not to mention that these 2-winged birds were made of explosive clay. With such speed and their sharp beaks, no one would feel good if they hit them. You want to hit me with these? Did you stay in Iwagakure for a long time and your brain turned to dust? Nangongja deliberately ridiculed. The angrier Dead Ale was, the more focused his attention on Nangongja, the more chance Conan had to get Dedale's blood. Compared to Nangongja, Dead Ale was still a little too inexperienced. Dedale's emotions were almost in the hands of Nangongja. At this moment, Dead Ale was really angry. He seemed to have forgotten that there was still Conan spying on him. Instead, he increased the output of chakra, making the 2-winged birds fly faster. Nangongja smiled easily and slowly stretched out his right hand that had been clenched into a fist. With a light flick of his index finger, the sword chi dragon had changed according to Nangongja's will. Several sword chi separated from the sword chi dragon and quickly collided with the two winged birds. When the explosion sounded, several sword chi not only did not dissipate, but also flew toward Dead Ale at a faster speed. Chapter 202. Deidara didn't react in time, and his chest was directly penetrated by the sword energy. But the strange thing was that Dead Ale didn't bleed at all where the sword energy passed through. Instead, a huge hole appeared in his chest like a clay puppet. There were even many fissure-like things that spread all over his body. Not long after that, Deidara had turned into a pile of debris. TSK, a substitute? Nangongja couldn't help but click his tongue, expressing his dissatisfaction. This is the most annoying thing about ninjas. Obviously, a sword pierced through his chest and he couldn't be more dead. But it directly poured a bucket of cold water on him and turned him into a pile of dregs. Even if Nangongja was well-informed and experienced, he still felt indignant when encountering such a situation. Where is Deidara's body? When Deidara first appeared, he was squatting on the giant bird to control the giant bird. When he used C2 a dragon, Deidara was still squatting on C2 a dragon, which proved that large clay creations required Deidara to be in an extremely close distance to control. Nangongja thought about it and he naturally had a guess in his heart. If there was no accident, Deidara must be hiding himself in the body of C2 a dragon at this moment. That huge body is not easy to form a strong enough shield. However, it was still unclear when Dead Ale had summoned such a substitute and hid his true body. It seems that I'm also confused by the situation. Conan hasn't made a move yet. It's very likely that the Deidara fighting with me is not the main body. These guys, each more cunning than the other. Glancing in the direction of Conan, Nangongja quickly refocused his gaze on C2 a dragon. Just now, I used Sword Energy Dragon to cut off some clay on the shell of C2 a dragon. Deidara was also affected when it exploded, which proves that the effect of this explosive clay is not directional. As long as it is stimulated to a certain extent, the explosive clay will explode by itself. On the other hand, Dead Ale was in a huge ball of explosive clay. If he detonated the C2 dragon, then wouldn't Dead Ale be seriously injured? After making up his mind, Nangongja did not hesitate at all. He immediately rode his sword Aura Dragon and clashed with the C2 giant dragon. This time, the sword chi of the sword chi dragon was not completely released like the first time. Instead, it focused all of its sharpness on the dragon's head, and the heavenly tribulation sword, which had already taken on the appearance of a dragon pearl, also changed its appearance. Countless sharp auras gathered on its body, and a huge heavenly tribulation sword was held in the mouth of the sword chi dragon. The entire sword hilt was swallowed by the dragon's mouth, leaving only the sword blade outside. It was as if the dragon had spat out the sword blade. Although it was rather complicated, the formation of the heavenly calamity sword was extremely fast. The C2 giant dragon's movement was relatively slow, and it was mainly a long-range ninjutsu. It had already suffered a lot when it brushed past Nangongja's sword chi dragon, and now it had to directly collide with Nangongja's sword chi dragon? What's more, in the mouth of the sword chi dragon, there was a huge heavenly tribulation sword condensed from sword chi. Without any suspense, the moment the C2 giant dragon came into contact with the sword chi dragon, it was instantly torn apart like a piece of cloth. The huge sword chi dragon directly passed through the C2 giant dragon's body, leaving only a huge hole. Above the hole, there were countless tiny sword chi that were split from the sword chi dragon. Perhaps the explosion of a strand of sword chi was nothing, at most it would cause a little pain. But with so many sword chi strands entangled together, when one of them exploded, it meant that more strands were about to explode. This was not a problem of 1 plus 1. It was an algorithm of mutual multiplication, and the huge power generated by it was displayed in front of Nangongja at this moment. The C2 giant dragon in the sky also exploded at the moment when the sword chi exploded, and a huge fireball appeared in the sky. The original blue sky had become like the setting sun at this moment. The sky was full of bright red clouds, and the blue sword chi was still wandering in it. The red and blue colors were mixed together at this moment. The scene became extraordinarily magnificent. A figure suddenly fell from the explosion of the huge fireball, as if he had suffered a huge injury, and flew towards the ground powerlessly. Was Deidara. Such a huge explosion was also beyond the imagination of the current Deidara, and his body was also seriously injured. Nangongja waved his hand, and the sword chi dragon dissipated in an instant. Borrowing some residual sword chi, Nangongja slowly descended and stood in front of Deidara. But Deidara's eyes were in a daze and he didn't notice Nangongja at all. Instead, he was like a fanatic and his eyes were full of a sense of morbid fanaticism. Ahem, this is real art. This kind of explosion is what I want to see. This kind of destructive power, this kind of magical and magnificent color. Sure enough, art is an explosion. Looking at Daidara's appearance of losing his combat power, Nangongja did not continue to move forward, but kept a safe distance from Daidara. With Daidara's strength, who didn't have a few last desperate means, Nangongja didn't know how many times he had suffered from this. The closer he was to the edge of victory, the more cautious he had to be. Daidara's eyes were still full of fanaticism, but when he glanced at Nangongja's face and where he was standing, there was still a hint of disappointment in his eyes. However, Nangongja was cautious, but it didn't mean that others were the same. Fei Duan jumped out directly from his hiding place. He glanced at Nangongja as if he was looking down on Nangongja and said, "This bastard has become like this. Maybe he was blown silly by the explosion. Then why are you standing so far away like a coward? We're in a hurry. If you don't go, then I will." For Fei Duan's words, Nangongja didn't care. Anyway, they probably only cooperated this time. If they met in the future, they might have to fight to the death. Why did Nangongja care about Fei Duan's attitude? He leaned slightly to the side as if he was opening up a path for Fei Duan. At this moment, Fei Duan was very arrogant. He stretched out his hand and combed his extremely smooth swept-back hair. He walked past Nangongja arrogantly and went straight to Fei Duan. Chapter 203. Not only did Haydn walk towards the place where Daidara was lying indifferently, Haydn's walking posture made people want to beat him up when they saw him. He didn't put Daidara in his eyes at all. After all, although Daidara had shown a lot of strength before, he was first suppressed by Conan, then Nangongja, and now he was seriously injured. Haydn felt that Daidara was no longer a threat at this moment. Although Haydn did feel that Daidara couldn't make any waves now, ninja's instinct still made Haydn take out his black iron rod. The iron rod elongated in an instant, and Haydn directly pierced the iron rod into Daidara's arm. No one could easily ignore such pain, but at this moment, Dedail was still muttering words such as art, explosion, extreme, and so on. Haydn was relieved and walked to Daidara's side. He took out a handcuff inscribed with runes from his arms and prepared to handcuff Daidara's hands. At this moment, a sudden change occurred. Daidara, who looked crazy, suddenly performed a very skilled grappling technique. One hand clasped Haydn's hands, and the other hand directly grabbed Haydn's neck. "Although I don't know why you came to provoke me, but now your companion is in my hands. The three of you are very similar to the previous group of weaklings, but there are still differences. You must be of the same level. You don't feel distressed about losing weaklings, but losing a ninja of the same level as you, no matter what kind of organization it is, it will definitely be distressed," Daidara said proudly. This time it was like the most inference in his life. You can actually see the difference in status from the difference in clothes. "It seems that it is a pity that I, Master Daidara, don't become a detective. You want to kill him to protect yourself?" Nangongja looked at Daidara without any worry on his face, but there was an inexplicable excitement. Dedail didn't know why Nangongja had such an expression, but the Haydn in his hand was his only life-saving means. No matter how the opponent hinted that the Haydn was not that valuable, Dedail could only give it a try. "It's useless for you to say that to me. I'm not the one in charge. If you want to ask that person," Nangongja said as he raised his chin, making Dedail look at Xiao Nan, who had just landed from the sky. Dedail thought that Nangongja was the leader, but since Nangongja said that Xiao Nan was the one in charge, Dedail looked at Xiao Nan. "Since you're the one in charge, why don't we make a deal? We have no enmity with each other. It was you who sent people to provoke me first. Now that I'm already in such a miserable state, the deaths of those people who died were worth it. We might as well stop here. You go your way and I go my own way. I will return this fool to you and you will let me live. We won't see each other again. Isn't that good?" Although Dedail spoke heroically, in the end, it was inevitable that there was a hint of begging in it. Hearing Dedail's words, Xiao Nan was completely unmoved. "You want to kill him? Then kill him. Anyway, such a fool has no value. Whether you kill him or not, you have to go with us." Xiao Nan's cold words were like a sharp blade piercing Dedail's heart. Although there was no way to immediately verify Xiao Nan's statement, Dedail subconsciously felt that Xiao Nan's words were really from the heart. Whether it was Nangongja or Xiao Nan, they didn't care about Haydn's life. It was obviously the life of someone on the same level as them. This group of people was completely unmoved. What kind of organization is this? They actually treat their own members as child's play? Don't think that I will listen to your nonsense. Since you don't believe in this master's means, then this master will really torture this fool. Listening to Xiao Nan and Dead Ale calling him a fool, Haydn also began to get angry. I can't afford to offend Xiao Nan, but can't I afford to offend Dead Ale? Are you King kidding me? Why do you keep calling me an idiot? If you have the ability, then go ahead and kill me. As long as Master Haydn is still alive, this master is your ancestor. Haydn raised his head arrogantly and said to Dead Ale, who was choking him, were these people all crazy? Originally he thought that he was crazy enough, but this group of people couldn't wait for him to quickly kill Fei Duan, including Fei Duan himself. You all are simply unreasonable. Dead Ale also felt like a fool being teased by Nangongzhe, Xiao Nan and Haydn. You dare to ridicule Master Dead Ale like this? Do you think your eloquence is very good and can suppress this master? Since you want this silver-haired fool to die, then this master will fulfill your wish, and must let him die very miserably. Suddenly, a spider made of explosive clay crawled out of Daidara's sleeve. Presumably, when Daidara had killed several ninjas of Akatsuki organization, he had secretly left such a small backup, right? The spider seemed to feel Daidara's anger and ran into Haydn's mouth very agilely. Unlike the previous Akatsuki's ninjas who immediately exploded after entering Haydn's stomach, this clay spider slowly traveled in Haydn's stomach. Even the place where the clay spider walked left a clay ball about the size of a finger. Such a dense explosion was enough to directly blow Haydn's body into pieces. Watch carefully. Your companions will die with me. Explosion. In fact, Dead Ale also used a lot of determination to launch the explosion. Such a close explosion will definitely affect him. Anyway, this group of people didn't intend to let him go, so he killed one of them first as interest. After that, no matter how they tortured him, it was not a loss. Dead Ale launched the explosion with such a heart, and a low explosion sound came from Haydn's body. The flesh and blood of Haydn's body were blown to pieces in an instant, and even Dead Ale was affected by the explosion in Haydn's body. The flame of the explosion also burned directly on Dead Ale's body. This battle is over. Chapter 204. Looking at the devastated ground and Haydn, who had been blown up with holes all over his body, Conan calmly walked in front of him. She took out a test tube with a green luster from her arms and gently pulled out the oak cork in front of the test tube. Under the guidance of Conan's slightly tilted hand, the liquid began to slowly pour on Haydn's body. The flesh and blood that had been scorched by the high temperature began to gradually fall off under the nourishment of the nutrient solution, revealing some intact flesh and blood hidden in it. Conan waved her hand, and a paper crane flew out from her hand, apparently summoning the ninjas of Akatsuki who were responsible for the aftermath. This matter has come to an end, and it was very pleasant to cooperate with you. Whether it was out of politeness or sincerity, Conan still stretched out her hand and said to Nangongzhe with a smile on her face. She had already stretched out her hand, and if he didn't shake it, it would be too impolite. So Nangongzhe still held Conan's soft and boneless hand in his own hand, and said with a friendly attitude, "You're welcome, it's just a mission to take people's money. Since I'm here, I naturally have to do some things that I should do." Conan looked at Nangongzhe's appearance, and she also had some plans in her heart. So she asked, "If it's possible, I don't know if you would like to go to Amigekure's Akatsuki with us? Although I don't know much about your past, when I talk to you, I also know that you were also devastated by war and struggle when you were young. Whether it is Akatsuki or Blood Cloak Pavilion, we all hope that the ninja world can become more beautiful and peaceful. If you are interested, why don't you plan something big with us?" Akatsuki originally had plans to annex Blood Cloak Pavilion. They originally hoped to pull an altar lord from Blood Cloak Pavilion into their camp through this mission. Then they would have more opportunities to absorb such a powerful force as Blood Cloak Pavilion into their organization. Originally, after knowing that Nangongzhe had become the head of the Blood Garment Pavilion, there was no chance for him to win over the altar master of the Blood Garment Pavilion to split the Blood Garment Pavilion and then annex it. At that time, Xiao Nan had not figured out how to absorb the Blood Cloak Pavilion. However, that night, when he was drinking with Nangongzhe on the roof of a house, he heard Nangongzhe talk about his past. Xiao Nan's heart couldn't help but have such a thought. Since there was no way to divide and absorb Blood Cloak Pavilion, then why not pull Nangongzhe into Akatsuki? Although Xiao Nan did not know what kind of power Nangongzhe, who had just taken up the position of Blood Garment Pavilion head, could exert in the Blood Garment Pavilion, at least Nangongja had a righteous reputation. If it was really necessary, Akatsuki could also dispatch its own forces to help Nangongja seize control of Blood Cloak Pavilion. Akatsuki could benefit from it, and Nangongja could also firmly hold Blood Cloak Pavilion in his own hands. Wouldn't it be a win-win situation? Therefore, Xiaonan had sent an invitation to Nangongja at this time. Planning a big event? Such a word also echoed in Nangongja's mind over and over again. It was true that Nangongja did not really control Blood Cloak Pavilion in his own hands, and even now, it was already in a kind of worship position. But Nangongja could not make up his mind to cooperate with Akatsuki. Itachi would also give him some information from time to time, from Itachi's description and the performance of Xiaonan, Fei Duan and others in the battle just now. Nangongja didn't think that Akatsuki organization was an organization that was willing to hide in the dark. There will come a day when they will directly float to the surface, and with that, there will certainly be even more intense bloody rain and foul wind. Nangongja felt in his heart that if he really stood on the united front with Akatsuki, he would be pulled into a bottomless quagmire. There was really no need to accept such an invitation. The risk was hidden in the calm lake and it was difficult to estimate the size of it. I'm sorry, Blood Cloak Pavilion is not something that I can wantonly decide alone. There are still lives in it, although I am the head, but I can't treat their lives as a joke. Please allow me to go back and have a good discussion with several altar masters. If there is a result, I will certainly tell you, Xiaonan. Nangongja's words were very polite, but his refusal was very firm. Saying that he could not risk the lives of Blood Cloak Pavilion's disciples, almost all of Xiaonan's arguments were blocked in her stomach. Because Nangongja's words were really not wrong, since he was the head of Akatsuki, he naturally had to regard the safety and development of his organization as the most important thing, and his personal feelings must not be used as a bargaining chip to risk the lives of countless people. Looking at Nangongja's appearance, Xiaonan could not help but think of Yahiko. At that time, Akatsuki had also grown step by step from a small and weak organization to a very high-status organization in the Rain Country. During this process, there were many people who wanted to use various conditions to subdue Akatsuki. But Yahiko was still not moved by such a temptation. Perhaps at that time Yahiko was the same as Nangongja now. He did not only regard himself as an individual, but also as the symbol of an organization. He was his own organization, and he was responsible for every life in the organization. Looking back at the current Akatsuki, did they lose the consciousness that every member of the organization was not someone who could be sacrificed? Xiaonan did not dare to think about it, because even Xiaonan was afraid that her organization would change. From the original gathering place of a group of freedom fighters, it had become a tool for revenge. While both of them were full of worries, but on the surface they were still very cordial with each other, the ninjas of Akatsuki who were responsible for the aftermath had already arrived. Xiaonan-sama. The ninjas did not immediately collect the remains of their companions, instead they respectfully saluted Xiaonan. Xiaonan deeply looked at the ninjas of Akatsuki, and suddenly her heart was also full of complex feelings. She waved her hand and said with a bit of indifference, "First go collect the corpses of Akatsuki, exposing them in the wilderness like this, the smell of blood will spread far and wide. Then separate Haiden and the target's body, and give both of them emergency treatment. After returning to the base I will let specialized people treat them. Go." The ninjas of Akatsuki lowered their head and said yes, and then dispersed to clean up the battlefield, erasing some traces that would expose Akatsuki. Chapter 205. Nangongja was still wearing the same plain-colored robe that he wore when he first came to the Earth Country, and the wide hood hid his face. The wind was still blowing some dust on the road. Everything was the same as when Nangongja first arrived in the Earth Country. After saying goodbye to Conan, Nangongja also walked alone towards the location of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. As for the Akatsuki's uniform, he naturally returned it to Conan. Just when Nangongja was walking at an ordinary speed on the road, Nangongja suddenly heard the sound of air being cut. Hidden weapon. Although Nangongja didn't know who attacked him from behind, but Nangongja still instinctively stretched out his hand and caught the hidden weapon that was flying towards him. The style of the hidden weapon was very strange. It was a special kunai. The original kunai should only have 1 point, but the one in Nangongja's hand had 3 points. The handle of the kunai was also thicker than the ordinary kunai, and there were several runes engraved on the handle. Flying Thunder God Jutsu Special Kunai? When Nangongja saw it for the first time he already recognized the special kunai. Impressively, It was the fourth Hokage who went to the shinobi world to find the person behind the attack on the Woodleaf, Minato Watergate. Just when Nangongja was still wondering whether Watergate was here or not, a figure suddenly appeared beside him. There was no trace of him, but there was a very obscure spatial fluctuation. If Nangongja hadn't used the Lion Clan space formation many times, it would be difficult to detect the spatial fluctuation. The figure that suddenly appeared didn't speak. He just pressed a ball of chakra shining with blue light in his hand towards Nangongja. Nangongja also reacted quickly, and directly threw the special kunai in his hand to the side. The Heaven's Disaster Sword behind him instantly came out of its scabbard and slashed towards the chakra at an extremely fast speed. The internal force attached to the Heaven's Disaster Sword, relying on the characteristics of the internal force, the Rasengan was instantly cut in two. The Rasengan itself was in an unstable structure. When Nangongja violently cut it in two, the balance of the chakra was destroyed in an instant. Boom. The sound of the explosion sounded, and the figure that attacked Nangongja had already reached the position of the kunai thrown by Nangongja in an instant, out of the explosion range. Watergate. Wait. It's me, Nangongja. When the figure just stood still and picked up the special kunai under his feet and was ready to continue the attack, Nangongja took off the wide hood on his head, letting the figure that attacked him see his face clearly. Sure enough, the figure that attacked Nangongja was also standing in the same place at the moment. Nangongja finally had the opportunity to observe the appearance of the person who attacked him. The blonde hair and the forehead protector on his forehead instantly proved the identity of the person who attacked him. He was wearing a white flame-lined haori, and on the back of the haori written in big letters. It's Shina Kushina's husband, Naruto's father, and the fourth Hokage who once fought together with him, Watergate Namikaze. Nangongja? Watergate said suspiciously to Nangongja. Yes, it's me. I didn't expect that after such a long time, we would have to fight when we meet again. It's really a strange greeting. Nangongja put the sword in his hand back into the scabbard on his back, apparently to prove that he wasn't hostile. Watergate also put away the kunai in his hand, and after confirming the identity of Nangongja, he also walked to Nangongja's side and said with a little apology. I'm sorry, I thought you were from the organization I have been chasing. I just received the information that they appeared in the land of Earth, and on the way here, I suddenly saw you wrapped up so tightly, and I thought you might have some connection with them, so I attacked you. Watergate scratched his cheek a little awkwardly. Apparently he felt very guilty for attacking Nangongja. Watergate has been chasing the dangerous organization in the shinobi world for the past few years, and after living in the open, Watergate's face has become a little bit weary. Obviously he has suffered a lot over the years. It's nothing, I know how you feel about that organization. Because of such an organization, Watergate had to let his child become a human column force, and because of this organization, Watergate's wife Shina Kushina's life was hanging by a thread for a long time. Watergate has been chasing this organization for so long, but he rarely found any information about this organization. This time he finally found some information about this organization, so it's understandable that he became a little anxious. However, Nangongja's words stopped halfway. Land of Earth? Activity information? Powerful organization? All of this. Watergate, can I ask you a question? Nangongja asked tentatively. Watergate was also a little confused by Nangongja's sudden question. Just as he was about to open his mouth to answer Nangongja's question, Nangongja said as if he was answering his own question. Is this organization the Akatsuki? Watergate's originally very kind eyes became sharp the moment Nangongja said the name. Where did you know the name of this organization? Tell me. Please tell me everything you know about this organization. Watergate said, but his hands were pressed on Nangongja's shoulders. The strength of his hands also proved that Watergate's heart was not calm at the moment. Is it really the Akatsuki? In fact, there are very few powerful people in the ninja world. In addition to the 5 great ninja villages that can control the power of the 9 tails, to be honest, Nangongja may only know about the Akatsuki. However, Nangongja only reacted now after realizing it. This is really, Watergate, don't be excited. I will tell you. Nangongja said such a sentence to Watergate. Perhaps Watergate has really faced too much pressure in these years. Such an organization that has its eyes on the 9 tails, isn't it putting a sharp knife on the neck of his wife and child? Watergate has been tracking down everything about the Akatsuki for years even if he doesn't know how to make wood leaf, because he wants his wife and child to live safely. Many people say that, a woman is weak, but a mother is strong. But as a father, Watergate also has the same feeling. As long as he can protect his wife and child, Watergate will do anything. Chapter 206. In fact, everything is very coincidental. The reason why I know about the Akatsuki is because Jiraiya-sama took me to Mount Mayaboku. Watergate, do you know about the Great Toad Sage's prophecy? Nangonja saw that Watergate had calmed down, so he pulled Watergate to a big tree on the side of the road, and slowly sat down on the ground. But Watergate didn't have the mood to sit down and rest at all, he just stood there. You mean the child of prophecy? As Jiraiya's disciple, Watergate knew more than Nangonja, not less than Nangonja. Yes, Jiraiya's disciple will become the savior of the shinobi world. Although Jiraiya-sama only has you as his disciple, Watergate, in fact, when he was young, he taught 3 children in the Rain Country. Although they didn't formally become his disciple, they already had a master-disciple relationship. So, I also investigated all the information about them. Some of the information about the so-called Akatsuki. Although it was only a few words, it still brought a lot of shock to Watergate. The people behind the scenes who have been threatening his wife and children's lives turned out to be his fellow disciples? Yahiko, Konan, Nagato. But why would they do such a thing? Obviously, Minato knew that these 3 children had been taught by his master, Jiraiya. But Watergate was still very puzzled and couldn't help but ask. I don't know. In the beginning, Akatsuki was a very pure organization. They were mainly formed to fight against the brutal rule of Hanzo the Salamander, the leader of the Rain Village. They were similar to freedom fighters who gathered together to fight against Hanzo the Salamander. But it seems that once again they were ambushed, and their leader, Yahiko, who was one of Jiraiya-sama's disciples, also died at that time. After that, the Akatsuki began to turn from light to dark, and gradually lurked in the shadows. Little by little he became the real ruler of Amigakure. Moreover, according to some unconfirmed information, at that time the ambush of the Akatsuki was not only Hanzo the Salamander's men, but also the Woodleaf ninjas led by Danzo. Woodleaf ninjas are also involved? They are all my senior and junior brothers. Naturally, I can use some peaceful means to resolve the conflict. How did things end up like this? Watergate also seemed to find it hard to accept. After all, whether it was Yahiko, Konan, or Nagato, they were all his fellow disciples. And with his master Jiraiya, Woodleaf Village actually directly participated in the operation to exterminate them? That was really too immoral. I didn't expect them to be the force you've been chasing. But since you said that they were recently active in the Earth Country, and their strength is also very strong, I couldn't help but connect them. Nangonja also felt that he was a little slow to connect the dots after such a long time. However, wasn't it the same for the Watergate in front of him? Who would have thought that a few children who struggled to survive in the country of rain would be able to establish such a huge organization with their own efforts? Anyone would overlook such a simple fact. It seems that it's time to go back to Woodleaf. About the Akatsuki, it's necessary to let 3 generations and sensei know. Watergate thought for a long time and finally made up his mind. These things are no longer his personal affairs, but also related to the Hokage clan. Jiraiya and 3 generations have the right to know such things. But, Nangonja, how did you know about the Akatsuki's activities in the Earth Country? It's even more detailed than my informant. Nangonja also briefly repeated his conflict with Danzo when he was in Woodleaf to Watergate. Danzo again? You're really a restless person. So because you had such a conflict with Danzo, you directly left Woodleaf in a fit of anger. You're doing this in the ninja world, but you received a mission from the Akatsuki and came to complete it? Nangonja didn't tell Watergate that he became the leader of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. After all, he still had the title of a Woodleaf ninja. You, a Woodleaf ninja, actually went out to be the leader of another independent force? What do you mean? Just think about it and know how big the turmoil will be after such a thing is revealed. So Nangonja still covered up these things. You're still too impulsive. Although I'm not in Woodleaf, Sandaime is temporarily acting as the Hokage. If you are wronged, there will naturally be 3 generations to redress your grievances. It's too childish of you to leave in a fit of anger. Why don't you go back to Woodleaf with me? Many of your friends also live in Woodleaf. It's been so long, so it's only right to go back and see them. Moreover, Shinakushina also mentioned in her letters that you helped her and her son a lot. Come back with me so that I can thank you together with the mother and son. When he was chasing those ninjas who attacked Woodleaf, he didn't have such a strong idea of going back to see his child, but when he suddenly decided to go back to the village, this feeling became so strong in an instant. Whether it was his child's cute appearance or his wife's voice and appearance, Watergate yearned for it so much. This Nangongja was actually a little hesitant because he didn't plan to go back to Woodleaf at all. This time if he went back to Woodleaf, he didn't know how many plans would be delayed. But looking at Watergate, who was very excited in front of him, Nangongja secretly shook his head. Presumably with Watergate's temperament, he would directly drag him back to Woodleaf. 3 generations to redress his grievances? For generations to vouch for him? Really? Nangongja didn't know whether to laugh or cry in his heart. Because in Nangongja's heart, 3 generations weren't that kind of people. And at this moment, in front of him, it seemed like Watergate was revealing his true feelings, and there was nothing strange about it. How can a ninja lack the proper calculation? His own strength, his own value, these are the reasons why Watergate pulled him back to Woodleaf. But at this time, if he refused Watergate's proposal, it would not be easy to directly fall out with Woodleaf. The conflict between him and Danzo is a small matter that can be solved. But do you dare to not give him face? That's no different from slapping Woodleaf's face. Chapter 207. Although Nangongja didn't plan to return to Woodleaf, in the face of Watergate, Nangongja still had to consider the possible situation after rejecting Watergate. Therefore, although it wasn't out of his own intention, Nangongja still decided to go back to Woodleaf with Watergate. Of course, whether it was Little Linger, Mishiro or Nangongro, they couldn't go back. As long as Danzo was still in Woodleaf, Nangongja wasn't sure if more sinister means would be used on his family. Only in this kind of thing, Nangongja wasn't willing to let his family face the slightest risk. Nangongja and Watergate walked together in the direction of Woodleaf. By the way, Watergate, since you have such a convenient ninjutsu like Flying Thunder God, why don't you go back to Woodleaf to see your wife and children more often? Since he wanted to go back to Woodleaf with Watergate, naturally the two of them couldn't just rush back like this. A little chat was also a good thing, wasn't it? Flying Thunder God. This ninjutsu is actually not so simple and easy to use. Watergate knew that there were very few people who practiced spatial ninjutsu in the ninja world, so after Nangongja asked such a question, Watergate said with a slight sigh, if Flying Thunder God is used in a small area, naturally the consumption is relatively small. For someone like me, even if I use chakra more than 20 times in a row, it will only make my body a little tired. But when the distance of movement exceeds a certain limit, whether it's the consumption of chakra or my physical strength, it will increase exponentially. Like now, we are in the hinterland of the Earth Country, not to mention using Flying Thunder God to reach the border of the Fire Country. Even from here to the border of the Earth Country, I will be directly submerged in the cracks of space because of the problem of physical strength and chakra. Of course, what Watergate didn't say was that as long as he had enough space coordinates, he could teleport in the largest range he could. After the teleportation, if he had a good rest, he would be able to reach Woodleaf Village smoothly. But Watergate forced himself not to go back to Woodleaf so easily. Even if he didn't have a fierce quarrel with the 3 generations, Watergate must leave Woodleaf to find the organization that attacked Woodleaf. All of this was to protect his wife and children. If he went back to Woodleaf so easily, it would not only wear down his determination, but it would also make Watergate fall into a deep self-condemnation. Watergate knew that if he went to Woodleaf, he would be reluctant to let go of the time he lived with his wife and children. Not to mention looking for the organization that attacked Woodleaf, maybe even his skills would be slightly reduced due to many reasons. Nangongja himself didn't like to talk to people. Although Watergate was very cheerful, his whole heart was worried about his wife and children, and he didn't have the mood to continue chatting with Nangongja. Both of them were very good ninjas. Even if they were rushing, their speed was extremely fast. After about half a month, Nangongja and Watergate had already arrived near Woodleaf Village. Although it had been a long time, Woodleaf was still the same. It looked very huge with vermilion paint on it. It was noon now. Woodleaf's door was wide open, and through the door they could already see the tall Hokage office and the Shadow Rock behind it. It's been a long time since I came back. Woodleaf really hasn't changed at all. Watergate seemed to be very emotional. After all, he hadn't come back for a long time. Just as they were about to step into Woodleaf, the guards at the Woodleaf gate stopped Watergate and Nangongja. Sorry, if you want to enter Woodleaf, please show your identity card. A ninja with a bandage on his face said to Nangongja and Watergate. Even the entrance has been changed? The gatekeeper was no longer someone he was familiar with. Suddenly, Minato had a feeling that things were still the same but people had changed. Was his decision to leave Woodleaf right or wrong? How many important things did he miss in the years he was away? Watergate didn't dare to think about it because the more he thought about it, the more he felt that his decision was too hasty. From his arms, He took out the forehead protector that he hadn't worn for a long time and put it on the table in front of Nangongja. I'm a ninja from Woodleaf, now I'm back from a mission. When Nangongja saw the forehead protector, he also looked up at Watergate. As the gate protector, Nangongja carefully looked at Watergate. The more he looked at him, the more he felt that he had seen this person before. Sorry, I don't know your name? Out of his duty, Nangongja still asked for Watergate's name. I'm a ninja from Woodleaf, Minafe Watergate. Minafe. Listening to Watergate say his name, Nangongja also took a pen and wrote Watergate's name on the entry and exit registration form. As soon as he wrote Watergate's surname, Nangongja already knew who the person standing in front of him was. You are the fourth Hokage? It's been a long time since there was any news about the fourth Hokage Minafe Watergate, but the story about Watergate has never been not mentioned. This is the most proud ninja of Woodleaf. I'll go inform Sandaime. Nangongja hurriedly got up and wanted to report the news of Watergate's return to 3 generations, but Watergate pressed Nangongja back to his seat and said to him with a smile, "It's okay, you can stay here and do your job well. As for the 3rd generation, I will personally meet him. Since it's your request, then there's no problem." After all, Nangongja is just a chunin, and it's his duty to inform 3 generations. Since Watergate doesn't want him to go, then there's nothing wrong with it. Nangongja just looked at the intimate interaction between Nangongja and Watergate, and didn't do anything. Nangongja's impression of Woodleaf has dropped to the freezing point, and such an intimate performance between ninjas, Nangongja can't stand it at all. This is my ID. Nangongja just took out his forehead protector with a little coldness and handed it to Nangongja. Since you were brought back by the 4th Hokage, there's no need to check it. Just tell me your name and I'll record it for you. Nangongja said very kindly to Nangongja. Nangongja. The brush in Nangongja's hand shook slightly, and a drop of ink fell on the record book. But soon, Gang Zite recorded Nangongja's name on the entry record. Chapter 208. Naruto. Stop. Just when Nangongja and Watergate were still registering information at the Woodleaf Gate, a loud roar came into their ears. Naruto. This name is still very obscure. If I'm not mistaken, only Watergate's child has such a big name. A small figure jumped on the roofs on both sides of the Woodleaf Street, and another figure has been chasing Naruto. At this moment, Naruto's face was full of excitement, as if he had done something amazing. Looking at the figure chasing after him, Naruto turned around as if he was mocking him. He made a face and said to the person behind him, "Ha! Arika-sensei, my masterpiece is so beautiful, why do you keep chasing me? Do you want me to draw a beautiful mural for your house?" The figure chasing Naruto is naturally Naruto's class teacher, Ko Irika. "You actually painted graffiti in the school. If I don't take you back and punish you severely, I will not let you go." Yes, Naruto took paint and painted graffiti in the classroom of the ninja school. Naruto's abstract style of graffiti, Irika's nose was crooked after seeing it, because he was abstractly painted in the classroom by Naruto. Irika can already imagine that every time he has a class in the future, the students in his class will involuntarily think of his demonic face. This time I must punish this stinky kid well and let him know how powerful I am. Irika thought so in his heart. Seems, your child is really energetic? Although Nangongja didn't graduate from the ninja school like Shina Kushina and Watergate. But Watergate's style of being a top student in the ninja school is still hurt a little bit. Now that his child is so naughty, it's very interesting. This kid, Watergate's mouth slightly muttered, and he has already cast the body flicker technique. Just when Naruto was still making funny faces with Irika, Watergate had already appeared behind Naruto. He skillfully grabbed Naruto directly in his hand. Irika was also shocked. If you want to use the body flicker technique, you must have the strength of a jonin. When did Naruto provoke such a person? But when Irika saw Watergate's face, such worries quickly disappeared. Irika just wanted to say something, but Watergate shook his head and stopped Irika. Instead, he once again used the body flicker technique and appeared next to Nangongja. Who are you? Why are you grabbing me? I wanna. Naruto was caught in Watergate's hand, but his face was facing the front, and he couldn't see Watergate's face at all. But Nangongja was standing opposite Watergate. Naruto recognized Nangongja at a glance. Uncle Nangong? Uncle Nangong, you are back. Mom told me that you left the village for something. Why did you leave for so long? Help me catch this bad guy for me. Bad guy? Is it really good to talk about your father like that? As for Watergate, who was holding Naruto, his face has turned green at the moment. The Flying Thunder God technique was immediately cast. Whether it was Naruto or Watergate, their figures disappeared in an instant. Although Watergate didn't tell him where he went, he probably went to see his wife, right? The two hadn't seen each other for so long. Nangongja didn't want to disturb the warmth between the two couples who hadn't seen each other for a long time. He shook his head indifferently, took the forehead protector handed to him by Z-Tai, and walked in the direction of his home. "Let me go. Let me go," Naruto shouted, but as soon as the Flying Thunder God was cast, the two appeared at the door of Watergate's house in an instant. He actually arrived at his home. Naruto's shouting stopped in an instant. What a joke with his mother's character. Once she knew that he got into trouble, wouldn't her life be in danger? What are you doing? Are you going to complain to my mother? No. My mother is so scary. After all, he had the temperament of a child. Naruto gave in an instant. However, the powerful ninja who caught him didn't seem to listen to his words. He just went to the door of his house. Step by step he walked to the doorbell. Then he stretched out his hand and pressed the doorbell of his house. "He's here. Is Naruto back? You brat, did you skip class again? Let's see if I don't teach you a lesson." Shinakushina's voice came from inside the house. In an instant, Watergate only felt that his eyes were covered with mist. His wife and child were in front of him, but he had never fulfilled his responsibility as a husband and a father. Creak. The door was opened and Kushina's face was filled with anger. She even had a frying pan in her hand. Obviously, he wasn't joking when he said that he wanted to teach Naruto a lesson. "Shinakushina?" Watergate opened his mouth and gently called out his wife's name. Shinakushina, who opened the door, also had a look of disbelief. A drop of tear quietly fell from Shinakushina's face. You're back?" With both hands covering her cheeks, Shinakushina's heart was filled with fear at this moment. She was afraid that everything that happened now was a dream, and all of this was her imagination. Watergate slowly put down Naruto in his hand. Just looking at Shinakushina like this, he couldn't stop the tears in his eyes. "I'm back." Slowly opening his arms, Watergate looked at Shinakushina, waiting for Shinakushina to rush into his arms. Shinakushina took a few steps forward, but directly slapped Watergate in the face. "You still know that you're back? You still know that you have a wife? You still know that you have a child? How can you? Maybe it was the emotions that had been suppressed for a long time that suddenly broke out?" Shinakushina clearly slapped Watergate, but she cried even harder. Watergate didn't care that his face was red from Shinakushina's slap. He just held Shinakushina in his arms. I'm back. Only Naruto still had a blank look on his face, but he looked at the open door of his house. A person who looked very similar to the blonde man in front of him was holding his mother in his arms with a smile on his face. "This is my parents' wedding photo. Is this man my father?" Chapter 209. After a long time, Watergate and Shinakushina finally adjusted their mood and let go of each other's bodies. Shinakushina's eyes were still a little red because of tears. She stretched out her hand to wipe away the remaining tears in the corner of her eyes. She tidied up her hair that had become a little messy because of her emotions just now. Shinakushina tried to put a smile on her face. She squatted down and touched Naruto's cheek with her hand. "Naruto, this is your father, he's back." Shinakushina's tone was very gentle, her hand was as careful as if she was stroking a fragile porcelain. Naruto looked at Watergate who was standing in front of him. His eyes were a little dazed. This was the almost perfect father that everyone talked about? For many people, Watergate was the savior of Woodleaf. Watergate was the most outstanding ninja of Woodleaf's younger generation. But Naruto didn't feel that kind of glory. Since this person was so excellent, since this person was so perfect, why did he abandon his wife and children and leave Woodleaf? She had never seen such a person in her childhood. He only remembered that his mother woke up early and went to sleep late every day to take care of him. When he was injured, it was his mother who was sad and angry to bandage his wounds. When he was naughty, it was his mother who scolded him, but she also personally apologized to others for the wrong things he had done. There were many times, things that should have been done by his father were often done by his mother alone. Even when he was young, it was Nangongja who taught him the truth and trained his skills. In Naruto's heart, perhaps Nangongja was more in line with the image of his father in Naruto's mind. Naruto vaguely remembered that when he came back from Nangongja's house, he even asked his mother very childishly why Uncle Nangong wasn't his father, because only Uncle Nangong had been protecting them. At that time Shinakushina was very angry and directly slapped Naruto. But when Shinakushina slapped him, she hugged herself and cried bitterly. Naruto saw his strong and gentle mother crying more than once. At this time, where was his father, who was called perfect by others? Naruto didn't know the truth, but a man who abandoned his wife and children and left home for many years wanted to be a qualified husband and a competent father? Sorry, even if Naruto was young, he couldn't accept it. Naruto reached out his hand, grabbed Shinakushina's wrist, and gently moved Shinakushina's hand away from his face. Such a person. How can he be my father? Naruto looked at Watergate coldly, and the coldness made Watergate's heart tingle faintly. When Watergate stood in front of the door, he heard Shinakushina's voice. Although it was only a short moment, Watergate had already decided that he must compensate his wife and child well. At this time, Naruto's words made Watergate's originally fiery heart turn into an ice field, and the wind was bone-chilling. How can he be Naruto's father? How can he be Shinakushina's husband? Watergate's heart also questioned himself in the same way as Naruto's question. Shinakushina looked at Naruto, and the tears that had disappeared from her eyes reappeared. Naruto, do you know what you are saying? Shinakushina really wanted to slap Naruto hard and tell him that what he said was wrong, and that Watergate was the most qualified father. But Shinakushina couldn't open her mouth to say such words, and could only stare at Naruto. I know very well. Naruto glanced at Watergate, turned his head and ran out of his yard. Looking at Naruto's leaving figure, Watergate was about to chase after him, but Shinakushina grabbed Watergate's hand. Shinakushina shook her head gently and said to Watergate, Naruto is a child after all. When you weren't at Woodleaf, Naruto had been laughed at by many children of his age. Many children don't know what's important and say a lot of hurtful things. Let him calm down. He will know your difficulties. Since Shinakushina, who knew Naruto the best, said so, Watergate didn't know what to say. Because looking at Naruto's rejection of him, even if he really caught up with Naruto, what kind of conversation could they have? Holding Watergate's arm, Shinakushina pulled Watergate into her home. Nangongja looked at the familiar courtyard door of his home, and for a moment his mind drifted back to the carefree 3 years. He taught some children at the ninja school, Mishiro helped at the Mayabuki family's clothing store, Nangong-ro worked at the Kiba hospital, and Little Linger studied at the ninja school. From time to time, Sakura and Naruto would come to his home to ask for his advice. At that time, this courtyard would be filled with laughter every day, but now, whether it's people or laughter, it's gone forever. He reached out his hand and gently stroked the door of his courtyard. Whether it's the paint on the door or the slightly rusty door knocker, their line seems so familiar. Little Ja? Nangongja suddenly heard a familiar voice behind him. When he turned around, he saw a woman with long cherry-colored hair pulling a little girl with the same cherry-colored hair behind him. Her tone was a little surprised and full of nostalgia. Yabuki, you're here? Nangongja smiled. The person who came was naturally Mayabuki, an old acquaintance he got to know when he came to Woodleaf. Sakura saw Nangongja and was very happy. She went up and hugged Nangongja's waist. She looked up at Nangongja and said, Uncle Nangong, you're back. Mom told Sakura that Uncle Nangong went out of the village to carry out a mission. Is it fun outside the village? Is there anything that's very impressive? Where are Sister Rower and Sister Mishiro? Alright, where is Sister Linger? The little girl opened her mouth and shot out questions one by one like a machine gun. Nangongja touched Sakura's hair and said with a smile, That's when you're a human. The outside of the village is very interesting. Uncle came back after he finished his work. Your sisters didn't come back because they had something to do. Let Uncle tell you about the outside of the village, okay? Children always look forward to things they haven't seen before, especially Sakura, who lived in Woodleaf since she was young and almost never went out. Sakura agreed with a happy face. She seemed to be looking forward to stories from outside the village. Chapter 210. Nangongja took out a blanket from the house and gently covered the sleeping Sakura with the blanket. Sakura was young and was at the age where she was fond of sleeping. Nangongja told her about some of the things that happened outside the village, which made the little girl jump up and down in excitement. But after jumping up and down, she was very tired and fell asleep on her mother's lap. Thank you, Yabuki, for coming over to help me clean up the house when I left. Otherwise, I was really worried that no one could live in the house. Nangongja looked at the person who had always taken care of him like a sister and smiled. It's nothing, it's just a small matter. You suddenly disappeared without a trace. You gave me a fright. I was worried about your safety for a few days. You're like my own brother, I'm also very concerned about your safety. Ye Chui looked at Nangongzhe and seemed to be a little angry that Nangongzhe left without saying goodbye. Later my husband told me that you're also a strong person. Even if something happens you can protect yourself. I finally let go of my hanging heart. But I thought that you might come back at any time, but you don't even have a place to stay. So I came over to help you clean up occasionally when I'm free. This is nothing. He had already left Woodleaf, but there were still people who were thinking about him. This kind of feeling really made Nangongzhe feel a little warm in his heart. Can I ask you what made you leave Woodleaf without any warning? Ye Chui was actually very worried about Nangongzhe, so she hesitated for a while before asking. Nangongzhe was a little embarrassed because Danzo's question was indeed very sensitive. Nangongzhe was not sure if he would implicate Ye Chui if he told her the truth. However, Ye's worries were real. Nangongzhe still felt that he should let Ye know a little more. Actually, it's nothing much. It's just that some of the higher-ups in Woodleaf want to force me to do something I don't want to do. I couldn't afford to offend them, but I could still hide. So, I took Ruru and the others and left Woodleaf for the time being. Actually, it was a coincidence that I came back to the Woodleaf. I happened to run into Watergate who was going back to the Woodleaf, so I came back with him to take a look and talk about the situation. When Ye Chui heard that it was because of the dirty dealings of the higher-ups, a look of understanding appeared on her face. In fact, Konoha's high-level officials had a lot of shady things circulating in the streets. In fact, everyone was well aware of it. Nangongzhe put such a big black pot on the heads of Konoha's high-level officials, there was really no flaw. Anyway, Danzo himself was also a member of Woodleaf's higher-ups. Letting Woodleaf's higher-ups take the blame together wasn't a loss, right? Just as Nangongzhe was about to continue chatting with Ye Chui, Nangongzhe sensed that there seemed to be some movement in front of his house. Yabuki, I didn't think that someone would come just as I came back to Woodleaf. I'll go take a look. Ye Chui nodded and signaled Nangongzhe to do as he pleased. Standing up, Nangongzhe held the god's retribution sword in his hand and slowly walked to the front of his house. Creak, as Nangongzhe exerted force in his hand, the door slowly opened. Looking straight ahead, there was no one in sight. Nangongzhe looked down again and found that Naruto was standing in front of his house. His eyes were red and tears kept flowing out of his eyes. Nangongzhe's hand that was tightly holding the god's retribution sword also slowly loosened. Nangongzhe gently squatted down and pulled Naruto's small hand and asked, "Why are you here? Daddy finally came back, why don't you stay with your daddy?" When Naruto heard Nangongzhe's words, the tears in his eyes stopped. However, he lowered his head and looked at his feet without saying a word. A gust of wind blew, bringing a bit of coldness. Nangongzhe knew that he couldn't always let Naruto stand in front of his house, so he stood up and pulled Naruto into the house. "It's cold outside, let's talk inside." Naruto nodded and followed Nangongzhe in. When they entered the living room, they saw Ye Chui sitting inside and Sakura sleeping soundly on her lap. "Naruto, what's wrong? You look like you've been crying?" Ye Chui and Shinakushina could be said to be living in two completely different classes. If not for Nangongzhe's existence, perhaps the two of them might not even know each other. However, Naruto and Sakura had received training from Nangongzhe since they were young. Even their mothers had unknowingly become good friends with each other. So when she saw Naruto's abnormal appearance, Ye Chui asked. However, Naruto still lowered his head and didn't say a word. Ye Chui couldn't help but look at Nangongzhe, obviously hoping that Nangongzhe would give her an explanation. "Watergate is back." When Nangongzhe said the two words Watergate, Nangongzhe clearly felt the small hand that he was holding tremble slightly. When he was chatting with Ye Chui just now, Nangongzhe had already told her about the news of Watergate's return. However, Ye Chui didn't immediately connect it to Naruto. Nangongzhe reminded Ye Chui, so she naturally understood. A father that she had never met, a stranger that was closest to her. This kind of thing happened to such a young child. It was no wonder that the usually cheerful Naruto was silent. Gently moving Sakura's head away, Ye Chui walked to Naruto's side. She squatted down and hugged Naruto in her arms. Obviously she didn't say a word, but Naruto's tears flowed out again. The crying was so loud that even the sleeping Sakura was awakened by Naruto's crying. Sakura, who usually had a bad temper, looked at Naruto who was crying in her mother's arms, but it was rare that she didn't lose her temper. She just quietly looked at her mother and Naruto. Nangongzhe didn't expect that Watergate's return would have such a big impact on Naruto, but thinking about it carefully, he watched Naruto grow up. During the time he taught him, Naruto never once asked him about his father. It was as if he took the initiative to ignore the existence of such a person. The knot in his heart had been formed a long time ago. However, these things were Watergate and Shina Kushina's family matters. No matter how much he pitied Naruto, these things must be resolved. However, looking at the sky that had become a little dark outside, Nangonja was worried about letting Naruto go back. Why not let him stay here for a night? Chapter 211. When Naruto opened his eyes, he was stunned for a few seconds. He finally realized that he seemed to have stayed at Nangonja's house last night. Wearing pajamas that were not very suitable, Naruto walked into the living room with slippers. The aroma of food had already floated into Naruto's nose. Oh, you're up. Nangonja walked in front of Naruto with a plate. He led Naruto to the front of the table and put the plate in his hand in front of Naruto. There was a somewhat simple breakfast on the plate, a fried egg and a few strips of bacon. I don't know how to cook, so I barely made some food. Why don't you try it? Nangonja smiled and said to Naruto. Naruto nodded, took the chopsticks in Nangonja's hand and ate breakfast. How is it? You're not at odds, right? Looking at Naruto, Nangonja asked. Nangonja's question made Naruto a little embarrassed. Nangonja reached out and put his hand on Naruto's head. He gently rubbed Naruto's slightly fluffy hair and said slowly, I know that your father's sudden return made you feel a little overwhelmed. This is normal. Although you are father and son, you almost never lived together. Such an intimate stranger suddenly appeared. It is indeed difficult to accept. However, half of your blood also belongs to him flowing in your body. But, Naruto said hesitantly as if he wanted to find a reasonable explanation for his behavior. But Nangonja's eyes quietly looked at Naruto, and a pile of excuses for himself could not continue. Do you still remember when you were young, you told me about your own ninja path? Thinking back, when Nangonja asked Naruto and Sakura about his ninja path, Nangonja was shocked by Naruto's answer. So, Nangonja couldn't help but ask this question to Naruto again. Naruto slowly raised his head, and his eyes became brighter. If you have something to say, just say it. Yes, just say it if you have something to say. In this world, there are actually very few people who can do such a simple act of, just say it. Because people always involuntarily avoid some things that they don't want to face, just like your attitude toward your father now. However, avoidance is always the most cowardly choice. Since you have decided to say it, then face it properly. Maybe you think that Watergate is not so competent as a father. But you can't deprive him of the opportunity to prove himself, right? Give him a chance. Let him prove to you and your mother that he can be a qualified father and a qualified husband, okay? In fact, what children hated most was others treating them as if they didn't understand anything. When others treated them as if they were children, no matter how reasonable the words were, it was difficult to listen to them. But Nangonja at this moment put Naruto in the position of a person who could think independently, and talk to Naruto seriously. There was no need for any persuasion. Nangonja just needed to let Naruto see clearly how he should face it. I know, I will talk to him properly. Perhaps it was because of his trust in Nangonja? Naruto listened to Nangonja's words very seriously. These were indeed things that he should face. There was no point in blindly avoiding and blindly rejecting them, right? Very good. This is the disciple that I, Nangonja, taught. I have already informed Shina Kushina. She will come to pick you up soon. I believe that Naruto will do what you should do. Nangonja smiled and said to Naruto. Naruto also smiled at Nangonja, then lowered his head and continued to eat the breakfast that Nangonja made. After eating for a while, the figure of Shina Kushina had already appeared in front of Nangonja's house. Perhaps in order to make Naruto not so repulsive, Watergate did not come. I really disturbed you. You just came back and Naruto came to disturb you for so long. When she saw Nangonja, Shina Kushina said very apologetically. It's okay. Naruto himself has been taught by me. He is also considered half of my disciple. It is right to take care of him. I've just had a good talk with Naruto. He has decided to face Watergate properly. You don't have to say anything about him. I believe that Naruto can think clearly by himself. Nangonja also told Shina Kushina about the things that he had just talked with Naruto. Nangonja was still confident in Naruto. That's naturally better. This child has been very stubborn since he was a child. Other than me, you are the only one who can listen to your words. This time it would be best if you could persuade him properly. Watergate has just returned to Woodleaf. There are still many things. I also hope that he cannot spend too much energy on his family. Although it was not very clear, it was obvious that Watergate had a little trouble with the higher-ups of Woodleaf. As Hokage, he left Woodleaf to find a terrorist organization. It would indeed make the higher-ups of Woodleaf complain. After Watergate left, there were still 3 generations to suppress the group of old men and women, but since Watergate came back, he naturally had to take back the power that should have belonged to him, which would cause a lot of trouble. I know. Watergate is probably worried now. But no matter what, family is always more important than any power. Please pass my words to Watergate. I have seen too many people break up their families because of their greed for power. This is a lesson from the past. I hope you can take it to heart. When Nangongjia said this, he couldn't help but think of the Uchiha Fugaku couple who were still living in the Lion Clan's different space. Nangongjia's words were not pleasant to hear, but Shina Kushina knew that Nangongjia had no malice, so she also nodded to indicate that she heard. As for whether she took these words to heart, only Shina Kushina herself knew. Nangongjia slightly moved his body, allowing Shina Kushina to enter the room. Within a few minutes, Naruto had been pulled out by Shina Kushina. Although Naruto's face was still not very good, he had obviously decided to face everything that he should face. Then, goodbye. Pulling Naruto, Shina Kushina slightly saluted. Be careful on the road. Nangongjia also saluted back. Chapter 212. After sending off Shina Kushina and her son, Nangongjia closed the door of his house and left with the Heaven's Disaster Sword. It was early in the morning, about 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. There weren't many people on the streets of Woodleaf, and even the air was a little bit cool. There was also some dew on the grass and trees on the roadside that hadn't been completely dispersed. From time to time, the dew fell from the leaves of the grass and trees to the ground, making some of the dry soil feel a little bit moist. Nangongjia wasn't just taking a casual walk, but walking towards the original Uchiha clan land. The Uchiha clan forcibly occupied a large piece of land in Woodleaf as their own clan land. Except for the Uchiha clan members, even the direct subordinates of the Hokage had no right to enter the land of the Uchiha clan without permission. However, after experiencing the night of the extermination of the Uchiha clan, there was no longer a scene of patrolling Uchiha clan. Instead, there was an indescribable sense of desolation. For people, a place where a lot of people died was a dangerous place and no one would be interested in it. So even if this place was out of the control of the Uchiha clan, no one came to discuss the acquisition of this land. Looking at the courtyards that originally belonged to the Uchiha clan on both sides of the road, those beautiful buildings were now covered with dust, and in some corners spiders were quietly weaving their own webs. From time to time, there were even 1 or 2 mice, wild cats and so on running from the corners of the road. Who would have thought that the strong Uchiha clan would be submerged in the torrent of history in an instant? Perhaps, in the future, the Uchiha clan will only become a few lines of cold words in the history books, unconsciously ignored by people. Although Nangongjia and the Uchiha clan didn't have a close relationship, but seeing such a scene, he still had a lot of emotions in his heart. Watching him build a tall building, watching him entertain guests, watching him collapse. The world was unpredictable, and fate would always give you a slap in the face inadvertently, letting you know that people's sinister hearts weren't just for show. Nangongjia came here to see Itachi's younger brother, who was now the last descendant of the Uchiha clan, Uchiha Sasuke. Nangongjia didn't know how to describe Itachi's treatment of Sasuke. Because sometimes hatred is indeed an important factor that can make people's strength grow rapidly, but hatred is also the poison that can easily distort people's mind and make people lose their way. Originally, Nangongjia also wanted to pull Sasuke to the Lion Clan's different space to live with the Fugaku couple, but when Nangongjia told Itachi about this idea, Itachi immediately replied and rejected Nangongjia's kindness. Although it is indeed risky to take Sasuke to the Lion Clan's different space, as the last descendant of the Uchiha clan living in Woodleaf, who knows how many people will stare fiercely at Sasuke. If Sasuke disappeared quietly, presumably many people will not be able to sit still, right? But these are not the most crucial reasons why Itachi refused to let Sasuke follow Nangongjia to the Lion Clan's different space. The ninja world itself is a world where the strong preys on the weak, and any protection is temporary. Those who protect you will not be able to keep you safe forever. And in this world, there must be a stronger existence than the people who protect you. Safety is simply an extravagant hope. The only way to truly protect yourself is to make yourself stronger so that you can protect yourself. Nangongjia's ankle exerted force, and his whole body gently floated, like a feather blown by the breeze. Letting his body stop on the branch of a tree, his body was completely hidden in the canopy. Nangongjia quietly looked at Sasuke, who was self-training in Fugaku's old residence. Sasuke's body was not wearing thick clothes. Now that the season is approaching late autumn, the slight chill in the air can be said to have a biting trend. But Sasuke's body was still wearing thin clothes, and even the sweat on his body because of the training has soaked his clothes. Sasuke, who is the same age as Naruto and Sakura, obviously has been training for a long time. Probably started self-training at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, right? Nangonja also guessed. This kind of training is indeed very harsh. A child of 6 or 7 years old can be so self-disciplined and so cruel to himself. It's really surprising, and at the same time it's also scary. Is this the result of Itachi's seed of hatred after it sprouted? It's only been about a year, and a young child has already reached this point. If it's another 5 or 10 years, how stubborn will Sasuke's heart become? Nangonja didn't dare to think about it because the answer must be very sad. Sasuke's strength is still very low, and there is no way to sense that there is a person staring at him from a tree not far from him. A pair of eyes tightly staring at the shuriken target in front of him. Sasuke just wanted to hit the target in front of him with the shuriken in his hand at the moment. The past teachings from Itachi slowly crossed Sasuke's heart. Sasuke has tried to keep himself calm and shoot the shuriken in his hand. But almost all of his shuriken skills are from his brother, the one who made him lose all the people and things he cherished, the one who can only live alone in the empty Uchiha land like this. Sasuke's heart became more and more irritable, because as long as he remembered what Itachi did, Sasuke seemed to see his parents being stabbed in the chest by his brother in front of him. They cried, they wailed, but his brother was completely unmoved, as if he had done something great. His indifferent face showed a kind of unconcealable joy, happy with his maturity. Whoosh, 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 Sasuke threw the shuriken in his hand out. The sound of the shuriken breaking the wind was so clear. Obviously he used a lot of strength, but none of them really hit the target. His heart involuntarily filled with a kind of powerless anger. Sasuke sat on the ground of his family courtyard. But at this moment, a very harsh voice passed into Sasuke's ear. Ha! This was laughter. It was the laughter of someone who had seen something very amusing. Chapter 213. Sasuke quickly took out a shuriken from his ninja tool bag and threw it towards the source of the laughter. The person who laughed was naturally Nangonja, who had been watching Sasuke's training. Although the shuriken had been brewing for a long time and still didn't hit the target, Nangonja deliberately laughed out loud to meet Sasuke. Who are you? This is the Uchiha clan's land. Only Uchiha clansmen are allowed to enter. Sasuke just said half of his words, but Nangonja immediately interrupted him. For a moment, Sasuke's cheeks flushed red. He didn't know if it was because of anger or shame. Nangonja looked at Sasuke with a smile. Although he didn't speak, Sasuke was very clear about what the man in front of him wanted to express. The arrogant Uchiha no longer existed. Now the Uchiha clan only had a woodleaf ninja and a weak child. Such a clan, what right did they have to proudly say to others that, "This is my clan's land, you can't enter at will"? Nangonja played with the shuriken that Sasuke threw at him, feeling the cold touch of the iron shuriken. But soon, as if he was tired of playing with it, his hand didn't seem to use much strength. He just squeezed the shuriken in his hand. Crack! A crisp sound rang out, and then the shuriken in Nangonja's hand, which was specially designed for ninjas, turned into a few pieces of worthless iron. After all, Sasuke was still a child of 6 or 7 years old. Seeing such a scene, even the precocious Sasuke couldn't hide his surprise. In Katan there was a technique called Phoenix Sage Fire Jutsu, which was used by attaching katan to the shuriken. The temperature of the C-class katan is also higher than the temperature of ordinary flames, but even in such flames the ninja's shuriken didn't turn red or hot, which was enough to show how unusual the material of the shuriken was. However, Nangonja managed to crush the shuriken with his palms, which were made of his own flesh and blood. You want to take revenge on Itachi? Ignoring Sasuke's surprise, Nangonja walked casually to a decorative stone in the yard, sat down leisurely, and looked at Sasuke and asked indifferently. When the name Itachi entered Sasuke's ears, Sasuke's expression changed. His originally gloomy face instantly became slightly distorted. At this moment, Sasuke didn't have the time to think about the gap in strength between himself and Nangonja. In a few steps, he walked to Nangonja's side and stretched out his hand to grab Nangonja's clothes. You know where Itachi is? These words seemed to have been forcefully squeezed out from the gaps between his teeth. His resentment and annoyance had already been displayed incisively and vividly in an instant. Looking at Sasuke grabbing his clothes, Nangonja couldn't help but laugh. I know, Sasuke's hand became stronger after Nangongja said such a sentence. It was as if Nangongja's clothes had turned into Itachi's. At this moment, Sasuke just wanted to tear him apart with his hands, with his teeth, with all his body parts that could hurt people. Is there? Nangongja's eyes flashed with a trace of impatience. He stretched out his hand and grabbed Sasuke's neck in front of him. He abruptly lifted Sasuke up, and the strength of his hand became stronger and stronger. Sasuke's neck was full of blue veins because of being strangled. Sasuke didn't know when his hands, which were originally holding Nangongja's clothes, had already let go. His eyes were filled with a strange mixture of fear and powerlessness. Sasuke remembered the feeling when Itachi coldly stared at him. He remembered the scene when Itachi let him see him kill every clansman with his own hands. Gradually, Sasuke's body began to tremble, and a whimper came out of Sasuke's mouth. It was like the sound of a beaten puppy begging for mercy. Humph! Nangongja swung his hand and directly threw Sasuke to the ground. When you're doing something, you should think about your own capabilities. With your current strength, you still want to find Itachi for revenge? Are you an actor in a burlesque show? You specially came to tell me such a funny joke. Nangongja's words were completely ignored by Sasuke, because at this moment, Sasuke was immersed in his own fear. His body fell to the ground and curled up into a ball. Sasuke's hands hugged his knees as if he wanted to protect himself. His body kept trembling and a weak whimper came out of his mouth. But the most important thing was his eyes. In his half-closed eyes there was a blood-red color. With Nangongja's eyesight he naturally saw it clearly. It was the Uchiha clan's Kekkei Genkai, Sharingan. Although it was the lowest level of the Sharingan, it was still much older than many Uchiha ancestors who awakened their Sharingan. One Tomo Sharingan. Nangongja also slightly muttered in his heart. It seems that this is the result of Itachi's stimulation. The Uchiha clan has always used the Sharingan as the core of their strength. Whether it was the shuriken throwing technique or the fire release that was beyond the ordinary ninja, it was actually the existence of the Sharingan. The higher the level of the Sharingan, the higher the strength of the Uchiha clan. It seems that Itachi's understanding of the Sharingan has reached a certain level. That's why he could accurately stimulate Sasuke, so that Sasuke could awaken his Sharingan at such a young age. After all, he and Itachi still had an agreement to bring down Danzo together. Therefore, in order to express his goodwill, Nangongja came to the Uchiha clan to see Sasuke. Although the method was a bit rough, it was also to arouse Sasuke's desire for strength. Only by truly experiencing the feeling of powerlessness can one be truly fearless. What he did was actually in accordance with the guidelines that Itachi specified for Sasuke. Only the Uchiha knew Uchiha best. At least, Nangongja believed that Itachi would not harm his own brother. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.